To understand the scale of the event we're going to talk about today, you first need to understand its source. You need to look at the sun, not as the warm, life-giving disk in the sky we're used to, but as what it truly is, a thermonuclear reactor of unimaginable power, suspended in the void 150 million kilometers, about 93 million miles, from our home. It's a ball of plasma, thousands of times more massive than Earth, its surface boiling at nearly 6,000 degrees Celsius, over 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and its core blazing at 15 million, 27 million Fahrenheit. Every second, it converts 4 million metric tons of matter into pure energy, enough to power our civilization for millions of years. We exist only by its grace, in a narrow, fragile, habitable zone, protected by a thin layer of atmosphere and a magnetic field that constantly battles its breath, the solar wind. We've grown accustomed to this balance. We've built everything on it. Our power, our communications, our satellites, our economy. We built a civilization assuming this balance was permanent, but it's not. Sometimes, the sun reminds us who's really in charge. History is full of such reminders. On September 1st, 1859, the British astronomer Richard Carrington was observing a group of sunspots. Suddenly, he saw two dazzling flashes of white light. He had barely registered that he'd witnessed a solar flare when, just 17 hours later, a coronal mass ejection slammed into Earth. It was the most powerful geomagnetic event in recorded history. Auroras erupted across the globe, so bright that people in the Rocky Mountains woke up in the middle of the night thinking it was dawn. Telegraph systems across Europe and North America failed. Operators received electric shocks from their equipment, telegraph paper caught fire, and some systems continued to operate even after being disconnected from their power supplies, running on the currents induced in the wires by the storm itself. This was the Carrington event. In 1859, it was merely a curiosity that disrupted a primitive technology. But imagine an event of the same magnitude happening today. Not tomorrow, not in a year. Right now. The consequences would be apocalyptic. First, a blast of X-rays would hit Earth, disrupting high-frequency radio communications. Then, a proton storm would arrive, disabling the electronics of satellites in orbit. Our GPS system, the global nervous system of navigation and time synchronization, would go blind. Billions of transactions dependent on precise timestamps would fail. Air travel would grind to a halt, but the worst would be yet to come. Roughly a day after the flare, the plasma cloud itself, the coronal mass ejection, would arrive. It would strike Earth's magnetosphere, compressing it and triggering colossal geomagnetic storms. Electrical currents hundreds of times stronger than normal would be induced in power lines, pipelines, and fiber optic cables. Protection systems would fail. Transformers would begin to explode all over the world. Not one, not two, but hundreds. Thousands. A cascading failure would begin. The power grids of entire continents would collapse into darkness. And this isn't the kind of darkness you fix in a few hours or days. We're talking about the physical destruction of infrastructure. Replacing the fried transformers would take months, years. There simply isn't a large enough stockpile in the world to handle such a collapse. This means no electricity, no water, because the pumps don't work, no heat, no communication, no internet, no refrigeration, leading to spoiled food and medicine. Cities, these marvels of engineering, would become concrete traps for millions. The chain reaction would affect everything. Financial markets would collapse, global supply chains would be severed, famine would begin, riots. Our high-tech civilization, built on the fragile foundation of electricity, would be thrown back to the 19th century, but without the survival skills of the people from that era. The damage is estimated in the trillions of dollars. Recovery would take a decade, if it's even possible. This is the real threat. This is not a Hollywood movie script. It is a scientific fact confirmed by reports from NASA, the National Academy of Sciences, and countless studies. We are living under the barrel of a loaded gun, and the trigger is 150 million kilometers away. And a few months ago, that gun fired. It all started with active region 39 gamma. That's what the scientists at NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center called the gigantic group of sunspots that appeared on the sun's visible disk. It was enormous, dozens of times the diameter of Earth, and its magnetic configuration was classified as Delta class, the most complex and unstable type possible. This meant it was accumulating a colossal amount of energy that could be released at any moment. For several days, astronomers, both professional and amateur, kept their eyes glued to it. The tension mounted. Forums buzzed with predictions. And they weren't wrong. On October 27, 2025, at 3:11 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time, Region 39 Gamma exploded. Satellites registered an X9.8 class flare, an event of monstrous power, one of the most powerful of the current solar cycle. But the flare itself, the blast of X-rays, was just the prelude. The real threat was following close behind. Coronagraphs aboard the SOHO solar observatory and the stereo satellites recorded what everyone feared most, a full halo coronal mass ejection. Full halo is a term that means the plasma cloud is expanding in all directions from the sun, but its densest, fastest, and most dangerous part was aimed perfectly, with mathematical precision, straight at Earth. The countdown began. Supercomputers in Boulder, Colorado, and at the Goddard Space Flight Center consumed the data on the ejection speed and density. Models like Enlil, used for space weather forecasting, started their calculations. The results were unequivocal and terrifying. The speed of the plasma cloud's front was over 2,500 kilometers per second, over 1.5 million miles per hour. This meant we had less than 19 hours. 19 hours until an impact that could change the world forever. The probability of a collision wasn't estimated at 70% or 90%. It was 99.9%. This wasn't just a probability, it was a certainty. The news leaked instantly, first as dry data on space agency websites, then as alarmed messages in specialized communities, and finally, it hit the world media like an avalanche. A quiet, controlled panic began. Governments issued restrained warnings, urging citizens to prepare supplies of water and food, but avoiding apocalyptic language to prevent chaos. Power companies began emergency preparations to disconnect the most vulnerable sections of their grids. Airlines started canceling flights. The entire world held its breath, watching an invisible threat hurtling toward us through the void of space. We waited. 18 hours. 10, 5, 1 hour. And then, nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. 0 hour came and went. Magnetometers around the world registered no significant disturbances. Satellites continued to operate normally. Power grids remained stable. The auroras were a bit brighter than usual, but nothing like what the models had predicted. The world let out a collective sigh of relief. Jokes about the solar sneeze appeared on social media. Pundits on TV started talking about how the models might have been too pessimistic. A few hours later, NASA and NOAA issued a joint press release. The official version was simple and elegant. According to their updated calculations, the main, densest part of the coronal mass ejection had passed just north of the ecliptic plane. Earth was only grazed by a weak peripheral field. We just got lucky. The models were wrong. The calculations were imprecise. It was a mistake. The greatest forecasting error in the history of space exploration had saved the world. The story was over before it even began. But what if it wasn't a mistake? What if the initial calculations were correct? What if the models, refined by decades of observation and running on the most powerful computers on the planet, didn't get it wrong? What if the plasma cloud, weighing billions of tons and traveling at 2.5 million meters per second, didn't miss? You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to start doubting the official story. You just have to be observant. Because there was another player in this story, a quiet, almost invisible one. An event that occurred against the backdrop of the impending catastrophe, but at first glance, had nothing to do with it. A few months before the solar storm, the Atlas Astronomical Survey in Hawaii detected a new object. It was faint, moving very fast, and most importantly, its trajectory was hyperbolic. This meant it didn't come from our solar system. It was a visitor from interstellar space, the third confirmed interstellar object in history. It was given the designation 3I Atlas. 3I for third interstellar. At first, it generated moderate interest in scientific circles. It was studied, its spectrum was analyzed, its orbit refined. It showed no cometary activity. It had no tail of gas and dust, which was strange for an object making its first approach to the sun. Spectral analysis revealed an unusual composition, rich in metals, but with no obvious signs of artificiality. It was classified as an anomalous interstellar asteroid or the nucleus of a dead comet. The news about it appeared in scientific journals and was forgotten by the general public. Just another cosmic curiosity, but its orbit was calculated with incredible precision, and it predicted one peculiar event. At the end of October 2025, during the very same days that Earth was bracing for the solar storm's impact, the trajectory of 3I Atlas was set to pass directly between the Earth and the Sun. It was a coincidence, a stunning, incredible, 1 in a billion coincidence, but from the perspective of celestial mechanics, nothing more. Space is vast. Things are always happening, and sometimes trajectories intersect. So said official science. And this is where it gets strange. Imagine a billiard table the size of the solar system. The sun is one pocket. Earth is another. And someone shot the cue ball, the coronal mass ejection, with perfect accuracy to sink it right into our pocket. The probability of impact, as we remember, was almost 100%. But at the very last moment, at the exact point where the impact was imminent, another ball appears in the cue ball's path. A ball that came from another table, from another galaxy, and whose appearance at this point, at this moment, can be explained by nothing other than blind, absurd chance. The official version asks us to believe exactly that, in the greatest coincidence in human history, that the ejection missed, and the presence of 3I Atlas at the point of interception is just a cosmic fluke of no significance. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if it was? Physics. Physics we don't yet understand. Or, far more terrifyingly, physics that someone applied. Because the initial data, the very data that was later corrected, the data on which the forecast of a 100% collision was based, never disappeared. It sits in public archives. And when you look at it, you realize the models weren't wrong. The system wasn't wrong. The ejection didn't miss. It was heading straight for us. And something got in its way. A lie, like any complex structure, requires a foundation. The more monumental the deception, the stronger its base must be. In our case, the foundation of the official story was a press release, published jointly by NASA and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, about 8 hours after the supposed storm had passed Earth. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic pacification, a document polished to the last comma, designed to close the topic once and for all. There was no panic in it, no drama, only a dry, confident statement of fact. It stated, And I'm quoting an excerpt. Initial models based on data from the Lascaux coronagraph did indeed indicate a high probability of a direct impact. However, coronal mass ejections are complex, three-dimensional structures. Their behavior in interplanetary space is not always linear. A subsequent, more detailed analysis using data from the Stereo A satellite, which allowed us to observe the event from a side-on perspective, revealed a significant deflection of the main plasma flow to the north of the ecliptic plane. Consequently, Earth encountered only the peripheral, significantly weakened portion of the ejection, which explains the minimal impact on the planet's geomagnetic field. The forecasting systems performed as expected, providing advance warning, and subsequent analysis refined the trajectory, which is standard practice in the dynamic field of space weather. It sounds logical. It sounds professional and scientific. They acknowledge the initial alarm, but attribute it to incomplete data. They introduce a new hero, the Stereo A satellite, which, like the cavalry coming over the hill, brings life-saving, clarifying information. They emphasize the complexity of the phenomenon, implying that we, mere mortals, cannot grasp all its nuances. And they conclude that the system worked as intended. Case closed. Move along. Nothing to see here. Billions of people around the world accepted this explanation without question. Why wouldn't they? It came from the most authoritative scientific organizations on the planet. It confirmed what everyone wanted to believe, that we just got lucky. That disaster was averted. But there was one fundamental problem with this smooth, polished narrative. It was built on the assumption that no one would go and check, that no one would look behind the curtain into the dusty, raw archives where not interpretations but raw, primordial facts are stored. And that is exactly where we are going. Imagine a digital archive. Not a glossy website with rendered videos and press articles, but a stark, utilitarian interface. More like a file system from the 90s. Endless list of files with names like SOHO, Lascaux, C22251270312005 FITS. These aren't pictures in the usual sense. These are files in the FITS format, Flexible Image Transport System, a standard used in astronomy for decades. Each such file is not just an image, it's a container of scientific data, a matrix of numbers, where each number represents the count of photons that hit a specific pixel of a detector on a spacecraft 1,000,000 miles from Earth. This is digital archaeology. There's no room for opinions or interpretations here. Only light, recorded by a machine. Our investigation begins here, with an analysis of the very data that NASA and NOAA cited. We need two sources. The first is SOHO, the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory. It's located at Lagrange point L1, directly between the Earth and the Sun. Its Lascaux coronagraph is essentially an instrument that creates an artificial solar eclipse, blocking the bright disk of the star to see its faint, rarefied corona. When a coronal mass ejection aimed at Earth occurs, Lascaux sees it as an expanding ring, or halo, around the Sun. And the data for October 27th is unambiguous. We see a perfect, symmetrical, full halo event. It's a textbook example of an ejection flying straight into the lens. The first point of the official version, initial models indicated an impact, is absolutely correct. The SOHO data screams it. But then, they play their trump card. The Stereo A satellite. Its name is an acronym for Solar Terrestrial Relations Observatory. The A spacecraft, for ahead, orbits the Sun slightly ahead of Earth. This gives it a unique perspective we don't have. A side view of the Sun, and most importantly, the profile of coronal mass ejections aimed at our planet. If SOHO sees the bullet flying towards it head-on, Stereo A sees it from the side, allowing for a precise determination of its trajectory. This is the key to the mystery. The official version claims that it was Stereo A that showed the deflection to the north. Let's check. We open the data archive of its coronagraph. the Secchi instrument. Frame by frame, we see a giant cloud of plasma erupting from the sun's limb, from the satellite's point of view. It expands, hurtling into space. You don't need a PhD in astrophysics to understand its direction. You just need to draw a line from the center of the sun through the center of that cloud. That line, that vector of motion, is its trajectory. And right here, the official story doesn't just start to crack, it shatters into dust. Because the stereo A data shows a picture directly opposite to the one described in the press release. The propagation vector of the coronal mass ejection is almost perfectly perpendicular to the sun's stereo A line. In the geometry of the solar system, this can mean only one thing. The ejection was not aimed north, not south. It was aimed precisely at the point in orbit where Earth was at that moment. The deviation was less than 2 degrees. On a scale of 150 million kilometers, 93 million miles, this isn't just a hit. It's a sniper shot. The very data that, according to officials, was supposed to reassure us, actually confirms the worst-case scenario. 2 independent spacecraft, SOHO and Stereo A, provide a consistent picture. Earth was in the path of a direct, head-on impact. How is this possible? How can 2 of the world's most respected scientific organizations publish a statement that so blatantly contradicts their own publicly available data? Are we missing something? Are there more complex models that account for factors invisible to us? Some subtleties of plasma interaction with the interplanetary magnetic field? Yes, such models exist. But none of them can turn a direct hit into an almost complete miss. A deviation of a few degrees is possible. But what they described is a deviation of tens of degrees. This is a fundamental change in trajectory, for which there is absolutely no basis in the data. It's at this moment that the investigation shifts from the realm of science to forensics. Because we're not dealing with a scientific error, but an information crime, with a deliberate distortion of facts. And I wasn't the only one who noticed. While the mainstream media was churning out reassuring headlines, in the quiet, obscure corners of the internet, on specialized forums for space weather enthusiasts, the work was already underway. People who look at this data every day, not for a paycheck, but out of pure curiosity. Engineers, programmers, amateur astronomers started asking the same questions. I remember one post on a forum called Solar Watchers Forum. A user with the handle HelioGeek posted a detailed analysis, overlaying the trajectory from Stereo A onto a diagram of the solar system. His conclusion was short and devastating. The numbers don't lie. The press releases do. This was the first real crack in the wall of the official story. Not just an inconsistency, but a gaping hole. The realization that the system didn't just make a mistake, it lied. And that changes everything. An erroneous forecast is one thing. It happens. But publishing deliberately false information that contradicts instrumental data is something else entirely. This is no longer science. It's propaganda. It's an information control operation. But why? Why would they need to do this? If the storm had really hit us and nothing happened, they could have just said its strength was overestimated. If it had missed, why lie about its initial trajectory? The lie was excessive, unnecessary, unless it was designed to hide something much more important. Something that happened in those 19 hours while the plasma cloud was flying toward us. That's when I remembered 3I Atlas again. That quiet interstellar visitor, which in the official story was just a footnote, a random coincidence. Let's return to its ephemeris, the tables that predict its exact position in space at any given moment. We open the data from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the JPL Horizon System, the most reliable source of orbital data in the world. We enter the object's name, 3I Atlas. We enter the date and time from October 27th to 28th, 2025. The system plots its path, and this is what we see. At the very moment the front of the coronal mass ejection was supposed to reach Earth's orbit, the object 3I Atlas was located precisely on the Sun-Earth line. Not approximately, not somewhere nearby. Precisely. The margin of error was a mere few thousand kilometers, which is nothing on a cosmic scale. It was there, at the perfect point for an interception. Now we have two undeniable but officially unrelated facts. Fact number 1. A massive coronal mass ejection was aimed directly at Earth, confirmed by data from 2 independent observatories, contrary to official statements. Fact number 2. At the moment of the supposed impact, at the point of the supposed impact, was an anomalous interstellar object. The official version asks us to believe that the first fact is a mistake, and the second is a coincidence. But what if that's not the case? What if the first fact is the truth, and the second is the reason? The reason why we're still here. Why the lights are on in our cities and the internet you're using to watch this video is working. The lie from NASA and NOAA begins to make a terrifying, twisted kind of sense. They couldn't tell the truth. They couldn't say, yes, the ejection was heading straight for us, but then something physically impossible happened that we can't explain. That would have created more than just panic. It would have shattered the foundations of our understanding of the universe. Instead, they chose the lesser of two evils. A simple, understandable lie that was easy to accept. The ejection missed. They sacrificed short-term scientific accuracy to maintain long-term narrative control. They hid an impossible fact behind a mundane calculation error. The issue wasn't that their model was wrong. The issue was that they encountered an event that didn't fit into any model, and they ignored the data that corresponded to that event. They chose not to explain the anomaly, but to erase it from history, replacing it with a convenient fiction. And that's not a mistake. It's a choice. A choice to hide the truth. And now we face the ultimate question. If they lied about the ejection missing, what else are they hiding? What exactly happened out there, 150 million kilometers away, at the moment when billions of tons of solar plasma collided with a lone wanderer from the depths of space? Because right there, at that point of impossible collision, lies the real mystery. And the answer, as we'll soon see, is hidden in the very same archives, in the data that no one dared to look at closely enough. They thought they had hidden the truth, but they only left a trail, and we're going to follow it. The architecture of silence. It's a concept you encounter when investigating the actions of large bureaucratic systems. It's not just a lie. A lie is an active measure, the production of untruth. An architecture of silence is something more subtle and sinister. It's the deliberate creation of a void, the engineered construction of a knowledge gap. It's when the truth isn't refuted, but simply deprived of oxygen, denied a voice, isolated in a vacuum of missing data. After establishing that the official story of the solar storm's near miss was a lie, my investigation shifted from what happened to how did they hide it? The lie in the press release was just a facade, a smokescreen. The real evidence, as is always the case, had to be sought in the foundation, in the very void they so carefully designed. So, the hypothesis was formed. The coronal mass ejection did not miss. It collided with 3I Atlas, which was at the perfect interception point. If this is true, then this physical event must have left a trace. It couldn't have happened unnoticed. Imagine two waves colliding in the ocean. Even if one wave cancels out the other, a complex interference pattern, splashes, and turbulence will arise at their meeting point. The same should have happened in space. Billions of tons of magnetized plasma traveling at 2.5 million meters per second can't just vanish upon hitting something. There should have been a flash, a burst of secondary particles, a distortion in the shape of the plasma cloud itself. Something. And the most obvious instrument that could have recorded this event in minute detail is the LASCO coronagraph aboard the SOHO observatory. Why this one specifically? Let's recall its location. Lagrange point L1, 1.5 million kilometers, about 930,000 miles, from Earth, directly on the line connecting us to the Sun. It had a front row seat to this event. Moreover, the object 3I Atlas itself, being between Earth and the Sun, should have been visible in its field of view. Yes, it was faint, but modern image processing techniques can pull objects at the very limit of a detector's sensitivity out of the digital noise. Therefore, if our hypothesis is correct, then at a certain point in time on the LASCO images, we should have seen something extraordinary. The approaching front of the coronal mass ejection and a tiny dot, 3I Atlas, right in front of it. And in the subsequent frames, the moment of their interaction. This would be irrefutable proof. The smoking gun. A photograph capable of changing the world. And I began to search for that photograph, diving back into the utilitarian, aesthetically barren archives of SOHO data. The work was methodical, almost meditative. The exact time had to be calculated. The ejection speed was known, approximately 2,500 kilometers per second. The distance from the Sun to the point where 3I Atlas was located was also known with high precision. Simple arithmetic gave us a time window. The interaction should have occurred about 13 to 14 hours after the initial flare. This corresponded to roughly 5 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time on October 28th. I started browsing the files for this time interval. Data from the LASCO coronagraph doesn't come in a continuous stream. The instrument takes pictures at a certain frequency or cadence. Typically for the C3 coronagraph, which has the widest field of view and was our primary interest, this cadence is between 12 and 24 minutes. So we should have had a sequence of images taken at short intervals, which would show the entire development of events, like a time-lapse. I opened the directory for October 28th, a list of files. Each one is a single frame, a single frozen moment in time. I look at the timestamps and the file names. 4412:05 fits, 4:12 a.m. Excellent. In this image, we see a majestic, almost serene picture. The front of the ejection, a bright, expanding arc, already occupies a significant portion of the frame, approaching inexorably. Next file, J42405.fits, 4:24 a.m. The arc has grown even larger, even brighter. Everything is proceeding as expected. Next file, 043605.fits, 4:36. There it is, almost in position. The next few frames should be decisive. I look for the file that should have been taken around 4:48 a.m. Then at 5 o'clock sharp, I scroll down the list, and my heart stops, because the next file is not there. There is no file for ER448, no file for ZO50, no file for 05.12. After the file, 0436.05.fits, the list jumps directly to 0548.05.fits. Between them, a void. A whole hour is missing. 5 consecutive frames. 5 key moments in time covering the exact calculated interval when the interaction should have occurred, simply vanished. They do not exist. Imagine you're watching a detective movie. A security camera recorded the victim entering a room. It recorded the murderer leaving the room an hour later. But the 60 minutes during which the crime occurred, the recording is erased. This is not just a lack of evidence. This is the evidence. It's proof that there was something to hide. The gap in the SOHO data was the ghost in the machine. A perfectly delineated, surgically precise void, located exactly where the proof should have been. A coincidence? Or a protocol? Of course. The first thought of any rational person would be to look for a technical explanation. Spacecraft are complex devices. They operate in a hostile environment. Glitches happen. Perhaps there was a data transmission failure at that moment. Maybe one of the deep space network antennas on Earth that receives signals from SOHO was down for maintenance. I checked the DSN logs. All 3 stations in Goldstone, Madrid, and Canberra were operating normally. Communication with SOHO was stable. Okay, maybe a glitch on the spacecraft itself. Solar storms are accompanied by streams of high-energy protons that can cause electronic malfunctions. Perhaps the LASCO instrument itself or SOHO's onboard computer froze and rebooted. This is a more plausible version, but it too has a weakness. When a spacecraft experiences a major radiation-induced failure, it usually enters what's called safe mode. It shuts down all non-essential systems, turns its solar panels toward the sun to ensure maximum power, and waits for commands from Earth. Such an entry into safe mode is a major event that leaves behind miles of telemetry. There would be a bold entry in the mission logs, safe mode entry at 0437 UTC. But there is no such entry. Moreover, other instruments aboard SOHO continued to transmit data properly during this exact time frame. The magnetometer was working. The solar wind detector was working. Only LASCO, the key witness, suddenly went blind for an hour. And it went blind at the most critical moment. The probability of such a coincidence approaches astronomical 0. This did not look like a random failure. It looked like a deliberate action, as if someone pressed the pause button in the control center, and then, when it was all over, pressed play. The data wasn't lost in transmission. It was most likely not even erased from the onboard storage. It was simply not released. It was quarantined, placed in a digital safe to which only a few people in the world have the key. They created an architecture of silence, and the shape of that silence, its precise location in time and space, screamed about what it was hiding. It was hiding the impossible. Let's look at the frame surrounding this gap. The last image before the gap, at 0436. The front of the coronal mass ejection is a relatively smooth, sharp arc of plasma, moving predictably. Now let's look at the first image after the gap, at 0548. Something strange has happened. The ejection front, now much farther out, has lost its uniformity. It looks ragged, distorted, as if it ran into an invisible obstacle that left a breach in it. In the center of this breach, where the impact should have occurred, the plasma structure looks rarefied, almost dissipated. It's like looking at the ripples spreading from a stone thrown into water, but only seeing the ripples, while the stone itself is invisible. The data that was meant to hide the truth actually confirmed it. They couldn't cover all the tracks. The time gap and the distorted shape of the cloud after it were the 2 pillars on which a new, alternative version of reality now stood. A version in which we weren't just saved. We were saved at the cost of concealing a fundamental truth about the universe. But why? Why take such an unprecedented step? What could have been in those 5 missing frames that would justify a global deception and the undermining of public trust in science? There can be only one answer. What they saw was not just an anomaly. It was a revelation. A revelation that, in their opinion, humanity was not ready for. Let's allow ourselves the boldest speculation for a moment. What would we have seen in those images if they existed? Frame 1, 0448. The plasma front closely approaches the tiny, barely discernible dot that is 3i Atlas. Frame 2, 05 Eura. The moment of contact. But instead of an explosion, instead of destruction, we see the object begin to glow. Not with reflected light, but with its own, as if it's absorbing the energy of the ejection, trillions of joules, and converting it into something. Frame 3, 0512. The glow intensifies, and something like a magnetosphere, but artificial, perfectly symmetrical, forms around the object. Like a sci-fi force field, it takes the main brunt of the plasma flow, deflecting it. Frame 4, 0524. The ejection front passes through this protective sphere, but emerges on the other side already torn, weakened, dissipated. Most of its energy has been absorbed or reflected. Frame 5, 0536. The ejection continues on its way, and 3i Atlas, slowly fading, continues its journey as if nothing had happened. Is this fiction? Absolutely. But it's the only fiction that perfectly explains all the available facts. The lie in the press release, the gap in the data, and the distorted shape of the cloud afterward. They didn't delete those frames because they showed some vague anomaly that could be written off as a detector malfunction. They deleted them because they captured an act of technology. Incomprehensible, non-human technology. They saw not a rock being hit by a wave. They saw a breakwater, a machine designed to withstand the fury of a star. And this knowledge changes everything. The silence was not accidental. It was the answer. The answer to what the LASCO coronagraph saw in those 5 missing frames. They didn't just delete data. They deleted the evidence of a miracle. Or, far more likely, evidence of engineering. And realizing this is like standing on the edge of a cliff you were just saved from falling into, only to see that on the other side stands something you can neither understand nor comprehend. When the system creates a vacuum, it does so with the expectation that nature abhors a vacuum. But in information warfare, a vacuum is a powerful weapon. Any inconvenient facts can be thrown into it. Any anomaly can be buried in it. The digital tomb created in the SOHO archives was supposed to be the final resting place for the secret of 3i Atlas. The hour of missing data was meant to be the epitaph on the grave of an impossible event. The calculation was simple. If there are no images, there was no event. If the key witness was blind, then no crime was committed. And this calculation would have been correct if light were the only way to see. But the universe speaks many languages, and sometimes when the light goes out, you just have to learn to listen to the silence, to its whisper, its echo, its resonance, and wait until a signal from another source breaks through the deafening quiet, a source that the system hadn't accounted for, a source it couldn't control. Our investigation moves from the digital archives of government agencies to one of the harshest and most isolated places on planet Earth, the Atacama Desert in Chile. Here, at an altitude of over 5,000 meters, more than 16,000 feet, above sea level, the air is so dry and thin that it feels like you can touch the sky. There is no light pollution, no radio interference. It's one of the few remaining windows to the universe on the planet. This is why the world's most powerful telescopes are located here, the VLT, ALMA. But we are not interested in one of these multi-billion-dollar citadels of official science. We are interested in a small private observatory located a few dozen kilometers away from them, a project known in Nash circles as the Echo of the Void, and its sole employee is the key to our mystery. His name is Dr. Stephan Burns. In a past life, he was a brilliant radio astronomer, a professor at a top East Coast university. He authored dozens of papers on star formation and the interstellar medium. But Burns was a heretic. He believed that modern astrophysics had become too conservative, too dogmatic. He argued that the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, was looking in the wrong places for the wrong things, that we should be searching not for deliberate messages, but for artifacts, technosignatures, the byproducts of civilizational activity. He proposed hypotheses that his colleagues considered too bold, bordering on science fiction. Eventually, tired of the bureaucracy and what he called institutional cowardice, he left academia, pooled all his savings, attracted a few like-minded private investors, and built his own radio observatory in Atacama. It was his personal hunt for the truth. His telescope wasn't a giant, but it was designed for one specific task: to search for short, broadband, anomalous radio bursts, the very techno-signatures he believed official science was ignoring. On the night of October 27th to 28th, 2025, Dr. Burns was not hunting for aliens. He wasn't tracking the solar storm. His equipment operated in the centimeter wavelength range, and he wasn't interested in low-frequency disturbances in the ionosphere. He was performing a routine calibration survey of a patch of sky in the constellation Virgo, preparing for a long observation run the following week. His system was fully automated. Algorithms sifted through terabytes of data in real time, filtering out known interference, signals from satellites, ground-based radars, cell phones. His goal was the pure, primordial noise of the cosmos, in which he hoped to one day hear the whisper of intelligence. At 5:03 and 14 seconds Coordinated Universal Time, an alert triggered on one of his monitors. It wasn't a loud siren. Just one of the lines in a log file changed color from green to red. The algorithm had detected an event it couldn't classify. On the spectrograph screen, where an ocean of background noise usually rippled, a perfectly straight vertical line appeared. A burst. It lasted only 3.2 seconds, but in that time, its power exceeded the background noise by a factor of thousands. Burns's first reaction, like any scientist, was skepticism. It was interference, an artifact, a glitch in his own equipment. He spent the next few hours trying to disprove his own discovery. He checked the power system logs, no voltage spikes. He checked the weather station data, no lightning discharges. He checked the ephemerides of all known satellites. None had crossed his telescope's field of view at that moment. He even checked seismic data. No earthquakes that could have caused micro vibrations in the antenna structure. The signal was clean. It didn't come from Earth. It came from space. The next step was to pinpoint the source. His observatory was not a single dish, but a small interferometer, several antennas working together. This allowed for high-precision determination of a signal's coordinates on the sky. When he ran the triangulation program and the numbers appeared on the screen, he felt a chill run down his spine. The coordinates, they were familiar. He opened the Minor Planet Center website and entered them into the search bar. The result made him freeze. The source of the signal was in the exact same spot in the sky, to within an arc-second, where, according to JPL's calculations, the object 3I Atlas was supposed to be at that very moment. This could no longer be a coincidence. This was choreography. While the SOHO coronagraph was blind, Dr. Burns's telescope was listening. He had recorded not a visual image, but an acoustic signature of the event. That hour of silence in the NASA data wasn't a void. It was filled with this cry, a short, fierce cry from the abyss. But what kind of signal was it? Burns began to dissect it, breaking it down into its components, and what he found was even stranger than its existence. First, the signal was extremely broadband, covering a huge range of frequencies. It wasn't like a communication signal, which is typically narrowband. It was more like noise, but structured noise. Second, it was highly polarized. Polarization is the orientation of electromagnetic waves in space. Strong, almost 100% linear polarization is a sure sign that the signal was generated in a very powerful and ordered magnetic field. This is known as synchrotron radiation, which occurs when charged particles, like electrons, move at near light speeds in a spiral along magnetic field lines. Synchrotron radiation occurs in nature. It's emitted by neutron stars, the vicinity of black holes, quasar jets. But the source of this signal was none of those things. It was inside our solar system. Of course, A coronal mass ejection is itself a stream of charged particles in a magnetic field. It should also generate radio emissions, but they have completely different characteristics. They are chaotic, weakly polarized, and their intensity rises and falls smoothly. The signal Burns caught was different. It was sharp, like a gunshot. It appeared out of nowhere, reached peak power in a fraction of a second, and vanished just as quickly. This didn't look like a natural process. It looked like the work of a machine. Dr. Burns formulated a hypothesis that was both terrifying and beautiful in its elegance. He proposed that he had recorded not just a collision, he had recorded the moment a defense system activated. When the front of the coronal mass ejection reached 3I Atlas, the object generated a super-powerful localized magnetic field. A field so strong and so ordered that it captured the incoming plasma particles, forced them to move along strictly defined paths, and thus deflected or absorbed their energy. And the radio burst he caught was the byproduct of this process. It was the energy ricochet. It was the sound of a shield at work. His discovery perfectly filled the gap left by the system. While NASA and NOAA gave us silence and deleted images, Dr. Burns from the Chilean desert gave us sound. Irrefutable proof that an interaction occurred, and that it was technological in nature. He didn't rush to publish. He understood that the scientific community would likely not accept his conclusions. He would be called a madman, accused of fabricating data. He knew how the system worked. So he did what any good detective does after finding the first clue. He started looking for others. He reasoned, if such technology exists, if there are objects capable of this, then 3I Atlas is unlikely to be the only one of its kind. Perhaps such protectors or guardians patrol the galaxy constantly. And if so, perhaps they have left similar signatures in the past. He spent several weeks building a complex machine learning algorithm. He fed the neural network the characteristics of the signal he had caught, its duration, polarization, the steepness of its rise time. He taught it to look for this specific pattern. And then he unleashed his algorithm on the largest publicly available archives of radio astronomy data from the last 50 years, on petabytes of raw cosmic noise collected by observatories around the world. It was like searching for a single specific grain of sand on all the beaches of the world. One night, reviewing the algorithm's results, he found what he was looking for. First one, then another, and another. The program identified several dozen short, anomalous bursts that had been dismissed by previous researchers as interference or errors. They were weaker than his signal at the edge of detection, but the signature was the same. And most astonishingly, when Burns cross-referenced the time and coordinates of these archival signals with the catalog of small solar system bodies, he discovered a chilling pattern. Each of these bursts perfectly coincided in time and position with the passage of some other anomalous object through the inner solar system. A long-forgotten comet with a strange orbit, an asteroid with an unusual spectrum, the very same cosmic wanderers that official science wrote off as quirks of nature. He realized what he had found. This signal, this short, fierce cry from the void, was not just an anomaly associated with 3I Atlas. It was a signature, a repeating signature. And when Dr. Burns started searching for this signature in the archives, he realized it had been left before. He understood that 3I Atlas was not the first, and most likely, it won't be the last. We are not just in space. We are in someone's territory, and that territory is being patrolled. A single anomaly is just a story. 2 anomalies are a coincidence, but 3 is a pattern. This is the moment in any investigation when the detective stops looking at individual clues and starts to see the outline of a criminal conspiracy. We are at exactly such a point. We no longer have just a story about one saved planet. We have proof of a lie in official press releases. We have an architecturally designed gap in the data from a key witness. And we have the acoustic echo of an impossible event caught by a heretic in the Atacama Desert. This is no longer a collection of facts. These are dots on a map. And now our task is to connect these dots to see the hidden picture behind them, to create a conspiracy map. Because what happened at the end of October 2025 was not an isolated event. It was the culmination, the loudest note in a quiet, invisible symphony that had been playing out before our eyes for many months. We just lacked the score to hear it. To build this map, we have to take a step back. Rewind time not by hours, but by weeks, and look at other, seemingly completely unrelated events that occurred in the run-up to and immediately after the collision near the sun. Events that the world media covered but quickly forgot, writing them off as technical glitches, natural phenomena, or bureaucratic routine. But in light of what we now know, these events cease to be random noise. They become part of a chorus, part of a carefully orchestrated performance. The first dot on our map, October 26th, about 30 hours before the peak of the solar storm. At 7:45 a.m. Coordinated Universal Time, something strange happens to the global Iridium satellite constellation. For those who don't know, Iridium isn't just another satellite internet provider. It's a unique network of 66 active satellites in low Earth orbit that provide 100% coverage of the entire Earth's surface. Their key feature is inter-satellite communication. Each satellite constantly talks to its 4 neighbors, creating a self-sufficient mesh network above the planet. If you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in Antarctica, or the Siberian taiga, your Iridium sat phone will connect to the nearest satellite, which will relay the signal to its neighbor, and so on, until the signal reaches a satellite over a ground gateway. It's the planet's second nervous system, used by the military, scientists, rescue services, mariners, anyone who works where there are no cell towers. And on that morning, it went silent. Not one satellite, not a sector, the entire constellation. A global, synchronous failure. For several hours, the planet lost one of its most reliable communication channels. The official explanation, issued by the operating company a few hours later, was brief and technical. They cited an unexpectedly strong proton flux from preliminary solar activity, which caused a cascading software failure in the onboard computers. It took them time to upload patches and reboot the entire system. This explanation was picked up by news agencies and taken at face value. The sun is acting up. Satellites fail. Sounds logical. But for those who follow space weather, there was a glaring inconsistency. Yes, there was activity on the sun. But at that moment, on October 26th, the main flare had not yet occurred. The proton flux was elevated, but far from unprecedented. Iridium systems are designed with multiple redundancies and are built to withstand much harsher conditions. A global, simultaneous failure of all 66 satellites due to that level of radiation is an event of negligible statistical probability. It's as if every single car in a city stalled at the same time because of a light rain. In the context of our investigation, this failure ceases to be just a technical problem. It becomes a tactical maneuver. Imagine a global surveillance system. If you want to carry out a secret operation, what's the first thing you do? You blind the sentry. You turn off the lights in the hallway. Taking Iridium offline for several critical hours created a perfect blind spot. Numerous data transmission channels, including military and scientific ones that could have recorded some anomalous precursors to the coming event, suddenly went dead. Officially, it was a side effect of solar activity. But what if it was a preemptive action? What if someone deliberately cleared the airwaves so that no one could hear what was about to happen? The second dot on our map. It's not in space, but in the darkest, coldest depths of our oceans. at the very same time that 3-Eye Atlas was performing its defensive maneuver. Remember, this was the early morning of October 28th. The global network of hydroacoustic stations detected a series of strange signals. This network, known as SOSUS, is a legacy of the Cold War, a system of underwater microphones originally designed to track Soviet submarines. Today, it's used for scientific purposes, monitoring seismic activity and studying marine mammals. At 5:07 a.m., just 4 minutes after the radio burst registered by Dr. Burns, several stations in the North Pacific recorded an anomaly that was later dubbed the staccato. It was unlike anything heard before. Not the call of a whale, not the rumble of an undersea earthquake, not the hum of a ship's propellers. It was a series of short, sharp, almost mechanical pulses, following each other with perfect periodicity. Morse code without an alphabet. A rhythmic knock that seemed to emanate from the Mariana Trench itself. The signal was very faint, on the edge of the noise floor, and lasted for only about 90 seconds before vanishing without a trace. Officially, the event was classified as unidentified and likely of volcanic or tectonic origin. A few short notes were written about it in science blogs, and that was the end of it. But again, the timing. The timing was too perfect. As if what happened in space caused an echo, a resonance here on Earth. As if the invisible breakwater near the sun and the mysterious source in the ocean abyss were part of the same chain. Two nodes on the same network. Was it just a coincidence? Or was the underwater signal a kind of receipt? A return ping, confirming that the operation was successful? The third dot on our map. The quietest, and perhaps the most important. It's not related to technology or natural phenomena. It's related to bureaucracy, to the slow, imperceptible scratch of a pen changing the rules of the game. 2 weeks before all these events, in Vienna, at the headquarters of the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs, a closed-door meeting of a little-known subcommittee was held. Its official name is the Subcommittee on the Long-Term Sustainability of Outer Space Activities. But among those who follow space policy, it has another, unofficial name, the Contact Protocols Committee. It is this group of experts that is responsible for developing recommendations for governments in the event that we ever receive a confirmed signal from an extraterrestrial civilization. At this meeting, without any public announcement, an amendment was adopted to one of the key documents known as the Post-Detection Policy. The old version of the protocol, based on principles of transparency, stated that any confirmed evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence must be immediately and fully disclosed to the public. The new amendment, designated Addendum 7 Bravo, completely changed this paradigm. It introduced the concept of an information embargo. According to this new clause, a specially authorized international body would have the right to classify any data related to unclassified exoplanetary phenomena for an indefinite period if their disclosure could pose a threat to global stability or technological parity. Simply put, they just gave themselves the official, legal right to hide the truth about space from us. They built the legal foundation for the very architecture of silence. Now let's overlay these 3 dots onto our main story. A few weeks before the event, the system gives itself the legal right to hide anomalies. A day before the event, it creates a global blind spot in communications. At the moment of the event, something on Earth responds with a mysterious signal. And immediately after the event, the system uses its new right to hide the event itself, creating a data gap and issuing a false press release. This no longer looks like a series of coincidences. It looks like the phases of a single, carefully planned operation. This is the very choreography we talked about. An orchestra of silence, conducted by an invisible hand. But even this map would not be enough if not for the historical context. And here, our artifact from the past takes the stage. August 15th, 1977. Radio astronomer Jerry Amon, working with data from the Big Ear radio telescope, discovers an anomalous signal that lasted for 72 seconds. It was so powerful and so close to the predicted frequency of hydrogen that Amon circled the printout with a red pen and wrote a single word next to it. Wow. The wow signal became the holy grail for SETI enthusiasts. The greatest mystery that was never solved. It came from the constellation Sagittarius and never repeated. Dr. Stephan Burns, armed with his new techno-signature model, decided to do something no one had done before. He didn't look for a repeat of the wow signal. He hypothesized that wow was not a message for us, but an intercepted event of the same type as the 3I Atlas event, but one that occurred somewhere far away in the galaxy. He downloaded the digitized raw data from Big Ear and ran it through his algorithm, which was trained on the signal from 3I Atlas. The result was stunning. With 97% probability, the structure of the wow signal, its polarization, and its pulse shape matched the very same signature. The signature of a magnetic shield activation. This meant that in 1977, without knowing it, we had overheard one of these guardians protecting some other nameless planet from the fury of its own star, thousands of light years away. And now the map is complete. We are seeing not just a conspiracy born a few months ago. We are seeing a system that has existed, perhaps, for decades, or longer. A system of concealment on Earth, and a system of protection out there, in space. And all the threads of this terrestrial conspiracy, as further investigation showed, led to one place. Not to NASA, not to the White House, but to a quiet, little-known committee at the UN in Vienna, the very one that rewrote the protocols. Its new, expanded and classified name, the Coordination Committee for Exoplanetary Phenomena and Response Protocols. This is the conductor, the central node that coordinates the actions of dozens of agencies worldwide to maintain the most important and most fragile illusion in human history. The illusion that we are alone and in control of our own destiny. The law of any investigation states, once you've proven a crime was committed, the next question, the only one that matters, is asked in dead Latin. Cui bono? Who benefits? Who profits from this lie, from this silence, from this grand performance? Because no system, no government, no bureaucratic machine will lie on this scale without a compelling reason. A lie is a resource. It requires energy, coordination, risk, and it is spent only when the truth is immeasurably more expensive. We have come a long way. We have uncovered the lie in official reports. We have found a gaping void in the data archives. We have heard the echo of an impossible event, and we have mapped the contours of a global, coordinated cover-up operation. Now we must descend to the darkest level of this labyrinth, the level where motives, not facts, reside. We must look into the cold, calculating mind of the system and understand why they decided that humanity must not know it had just been saved. The first, most obvious, and at first glance, most noble motive is the prevention of panic. This is the Good Shepherd argument. The system, in its infinite condescending wisdom, looks down on us, on 8 billion restless, emotional, irrational human beings, and decides to protect us from ourselves. It decides that we are children who must not be told there's a monster in the house, even if that monster just chased a wolf from our door. Let's imagine an alternative scenario for a moment. Imagine that the day after the trickster event, the President of the United States, the Secretary General of the UN, and the heads of NASA and ESA hold a joint press conference, and they tell the truth, the whole truth. Ladies and gentlemen, one of them would say, his face gray with sleep deprivation and the burden of knowledge, yesterday, Our planet was a hair's breadth from a catastrophe that would have sent our civilization back to the Stone Age. A massive coronal mass ejection was aimed directly at us. Our models were not wrong. It should have hit us. But it didn't. Because between us and the sun was an interstellar object, 3I Atlas. And this object, by all appearances, is not a natural body. It actively intervened. It absorbed or deflected the impact. We do not know what it is. We do not know who sent it. We do not know its purpose. We know only one thing. We are not alone. And we may be under someone's protection, or someone's observation. Thank you for your attention. What would happen in the next few hours? In the next few days? The word panic is too weak to describe the existential tsunami that would crash over the planet. The financial markets would be the first to collapse. Our entire world, our entire economy, is built on one fundamental principle: predictability. On the belief that tomorrow will be more or less like today. That one can make plans for 5, 10, 50 years ahead. The news that we are under the care of an incomprehensible alien intelligence destroys predictability. It introduces a variable of infinite magnitude into the equation. Who would invest in long-term projects if tomorrow the protector might decide our existence is no longer expedient? Defense stocks would skyrocket. All other stocks would plummet into the abyss. There would be a global run on cash, on gold, on canned goods. The economy, that complex mechanism based on trust, would grind to a halt. Then would come social collapse. Imagine the religious crisis. For millennia, the world's major religions have taught us that we are the pinnacle of creation, made in God's image. What happens to that dogma when it turns out there is someone in the cosmos immeasurably older, wiser, and more powerful than us? Someone who treats us as we treat ants in a terrarium, whom we protect from overheating to continue our experiments. Some would see 3I Atlas as an angel, the second coming, a divine intervention. Others, a demon, a harbinger of the apocalypse. New cults would arise, worshipping the celestial guardian. Religious wars would begin. Millions of people, their worldview just shattered, would turn to the most radical ideologies in search of new answers. And finally, the psychological breakdown would come. Our very sense of identity, our ego as a species, is built on the idea that we are the masters of our own destiny. That we, with all our flaws, are the most intelligent force on this planet. The news that we are merely an object in someone's collection, subjects in someone's laboratory, or worse, livestock on someone's farm, would be unbearable. It's a blow to the very foundation of human dignity. It's the realization of our own cosmic insignificance. Many simply wouldn't be able to handle it. An epidemic of depression, suicides, mass psychoses would begin. Cities, these centers of our civilization, would turn into boiling cauldrons of fear and uncertainty. From this perspective, the system's decision to lie looks not just logical, it looks humane. They looked at this picture of chaos and decided the price of truth was too high. They chose stability over truth, order over revelation. They decided it was better for us to live in a comfortable, predictable lie than to face an uncomfortable, destructive truth. It's Dostoevsky's classic Grand Inquisitor dilemma. Give people freedom and truth they cannot handle, or give them bread, miracles, and mystery, taking away their freedom for the sake of their own happiness. The system chose the second path, and if this were the only motive, our story could end on this tragic but understandable note. But this is only the first, outer layer of the onion. Beneath it lies another, far more cynical and realistic motive: the preservation of power. The truth about 3I Atlas threatens not just the peace of mind of the public. It threatens the very foundations of the structures that govern our world. What is a government? It is an institution with a monopoly on violence and, more importantly, on protection. We pay taxes and obey laws in exchange for the promise that the state will protect us from external and internal threats. What happens to the legitimacy of any earthly government when it turns out that real protection from the most terrible of all threats, a cosmic one, is provided by some third, unknown force? Any president, any prime minister, any general instantly transforms from a national leader into a mere territory manager. Their power becomes a fiction. What is our global economy? It's a system of resource distribution controlled by multinational corporations and financial institutions. Their power is based on control over technology, energy, information. What happens to this power when a player appears on the scene whose technological capabilities allow it to control the energy of a star? Any terrestrial corporation, be it an oil giant or an IT monopoly, becomes no more than a craftsman's shop compared to an industrial empire. The truth about 3i Atlas is not just news. It's a reset event. It nullifies all hierarchies, all power structures that have been built on this planet for millennia. And those at the top of these hierarchies, those who hold real power, will never, under any circumstances, allow such a reset. Hiding the truth is not about protecting us from chaos. It's about protecting their status quo. It is an act of self-preservation by the global elite. But even this is not the deepest level. We must go deeper still, to where fear and greed merge into a single, dark instinct. And history will help us here. Let's go back to 1939. A handful of émigré physicists in the United States realized that recent discoveries in nuclear physics make it possible to create a weapon of unimaginable destructive power, the atomic bomb. And they realize that Nazi Germany is likely already working on it. What do? They don't hold a press conference. They don't publish their findings in scientific journals. They write a secret letter to President Roosevelt. And thus, the Manhattan Project is born. The largest, most expensive, and most secret scientific technical program in human history. Hundreds of thousands of people worked on it without knowing its ultimate goal. All information was compartmentalized, so no one could see the big picture. And it was all done for one purpose: to get the ultimate weapon first, to gain a technological advantage that would guarantee victory and world dominance for decades to come. Now let's return to our time. The object 3i Atlas is not just a protector. From the perspective of the military and intelligence services, it is, first and foremost, a sample of incomprehensible technology. A technology capable of creating and controlling localized magnetic fields of monstrous power. Whoever is the first to understand how this shield works, who can copy it or even partially reproduce it, will gain not just a new weapon. They will gain what military theorists call a revolution in military affairs. Imagine a tank, a ship, or a plane surrounded by such a field. It becomes invulnerable to any existing weapon. Imagine the ability to project such a field at a distance to shoot down enemy satellites or ballistic missiles. It renders the entire modern concept of nuclear deterrence meaningless. The country possessing such technology becomes invincible, and he who is invincible can dictate his will to the rest of the world. There it is, the darkest, most powerful motive for the cover-up. It's not preventing panic. It's not preserving power. It's the beginning of a new, secret arms race. A global one, but completely invisible to us. The very moment the system decided to hide the truth, it launched a new Manhattan Project. Somewhere in secret laboratories, in underground bunkers, the best minds on the planet, bound by non-disclosure agreements, are right now trying to decipher the few pieces of data they have. They are analyzing Dr. Burns's radio signal. They are trying to simulate on supercomputers the interaction that was erased from the SOHO archives. They are trying to understand the physics behind this miracle. And they are hiding the truth not to protect us. They are hiding it to buy time. The time they need to crack this technology before their geopolitical adversaries do. To them, We are not citizens to be informed. We are distracting noise, a background that must not interfere with the great game. This is why the UN protocols were rewritten. This is why Iridium was shut down. This is why the disinformation machine was launched. These are all elements of the same strategy, a strategy that has been used in the past. Think about Project MKUltra, when the CIA conducted secret experiments on its own citizens for decades in search of mind control methods. Think about the reports on the Roswell incident, which were classified for decades. Think about the countless cases where the truth about technological disasters or war crimes was hidden under the pretext of national security. The system has lied to us before, is lying to us now, and will lie to us in the future if it believes the lie serves its interests. The cover-up of 3I Atlas is not an exception. It is the rule. It is its modus operandi. So, cui bono? Who benefits? Everyone in power benefits. Governments that avoid the collapse of their legitimacy benefit. Corporations that maintain their control over the world economy benefit. And most of all, the military-industrial complexes that have gained access to the greatest technological prize in history benefit. They are all shareholders in this enterprise called the Great Silence. And we are not even spectators. We are part of the scenery. And the most terrifying conclusion from all of this is the following. They hid the truth not to protect us from panic. They hid it to buy time to prepare a response. Not a response to the threat of a solar storm, but a response to the very existence of 3I Atlas. And looking at human history, one has to ask the most disturbing question. What kind of response do we always prepare when faced with a power we cannot understand, but desperately want to control? We don't prepare a handshake. We prepare a weapon. We've done a tremendous amount of work to clear away the rubble of lies and omissions built by the system. We've descended into the cold depths of their motives, from the noble concern for our peace of mind to the cynical lust for power and technological supremacy. We understand why they hid the truth. Now it's time to return to the source, to the anomaly itself, to the silent, enigmatic object whose mere presence forced the most powerful institutions on Earth to engage in an unprecedented deception. We must conduct a detailed, almost forensic analysis of 3I Atlas. We must gather every crumb of data, every oddity and inconsistency that official science politely ignored or wrote off as measurement error. We must look at it not as a space rock, but as an intention, as an artifact, as a machine. Because it is in its anatomy, in its strange, unnatural properties, that the key lies not only to what it did, but to why it's here. Our autopsy begins with the most fundamental parameter of any celestial body, its orbit. Officially, 3I Atlas was classified as an interstellar object due to its hyperbolic trajectory. Simply put, its velocity was so high that the sun's gravity could not capture it and make it part of our system. It came from outside and was supposed to leave forever. This in itself makes it a rare visitor. But the devil, as always, is in the details. And the main detail here is a value called eccentricity. The eccentricity of an orbit describes how elongated it is. For a perfect circle, it is 0. For the ellipses along which planets move, it is greater than 0, but less than 1. For a parabola, the trajectory of an object on the verge of escaping, it is exactly 1. And for a hyperbola, the trajectory of an interstellar wanderer, it must be greater than 1. The eccentricity of 3I Atlas's orbit, calculated from hundreds of observations, was 1002. This number, at first glance, seems unremarkable. It's slightly greater than 1, which formally confirms its interstellar status. But for astrophysicists who study the dynamics of small bodies, this number is a screaming anomaly. It is too perfect, too close to 1, the vast majority of objects that could theoretically be ejected from other star systems through gravitational interactions should have a much higher eccentricity. They should be speeding through our system with enormous excess velocity. The orbit of 3I Atlas, however, suggests it entered the solar system with the minimum possible excess velocity. It wasn't just flying by. In naval tactical terms, it was making a slow pass. It was moving at exactly the speed required to guarantee its departure, while remaining inside the system for as long as possible. This looked less like the random flight of a rock thrown from infinity and more like a carefully calculated gravitational maneuver, a deliberate approach. The second oddity of its orbit is its inclination. Most objects in the solar system, from planets to asteroids, orbit the sun in roughly the same plane, called the ecliptic plane. This is a legacy of the gas and dust disk from which they all once formed. An interstellar visitor, theoretically, can arrive from any direction. Its orbit can be inclined to the ecliptic at any angle. But the orbit of 3I Atlas was inclined to it by only 2 degrees. It was moving in almost the same plane as all the planets. Again, this is a possible, but extremely unlikely coincidence. It's like walking onto a busy multi-lane highway with your eyes closed and finding you are walking precisely on the dividing line. The probability is so low that it forces one to look for a non-random explanation. This orbit, with its nearly parabolic eccentricity and almost zero inclination, wasn't just a trajectory. It was a statement. A statement that the object knows the rules of the road in this particular star system. The next stage of our analysis is the object's composition. What is it made of? The official data, obtained through spectroscopy, was scarce and contradictory. Spectroscopy is a method where light reflected from an object is broken down into its constituent colors, like a rainbow in a prism. By the dark absorption lines in this spectrum, scientists can determine which chemical elements are present on its surface. The spectrum of 3I Atlas was almost perfectly smooth, without any distinct lines. This is called a featureless red spectrum. This means its surface is either covered with some complex organic molecules that absorb light uniformly across the entire range, or it's made of something that reflects light very well without revealing its composition, like polished metal. But the strangest thing was not what the spectrum showed, but what it didn't. When an object made of ice and rock first approaches the sun, its surface heats up. The ice begins to sublimate, turning directly from a solid to a gas. A coma, a cloud of gas and dust, forms around the object, and solar pressure and wind stretch this cloud into a tail. We call such objects comets. 3I Atlas, arriving from the cold depths of interstellar space, should have behaved exactly like this, but it didn't. Throughout the entire observation period, it showed not the slightest sign of cometary activity. No coma, no tail. This meant one of 2 things. Either it is composed of refractory materials capable of withstanding heat without outgassing, making it similar to an asteroid, or its surface is engineered to resist this heating, like the hull of a spaceship. It was precisely the lack of cometary activity that allowed scientists to make another startling discovery. Analyzing its trajectory, they noticed a tiny but systematic deviation from the path dictated by the sun's gravity alone. The object exhibited so-called non-gravitational acceleration. It was braking slightly as if something invisible were pushing it from behind. For comets, this phenomenon is easily explained. The gas evaporating from the surface acts like a tiny rocket engine, but 3I Atlas had no gas. So where did this acceleration come from? Official science hit a dead end, proposing several exotic and unlikely hypotheses, like asymmetric thermal radiation. But in the context of our investigation, a completely different, frighteningly simple explanation suggests itself. It wasn't a side effect. It was an engine. A low-power one, perhaps an ion drive, or a solar sail, producing a constant, barely perceptible thrust, sufficient for fine course correction, the very correction that allowed it to take up the perfect position to intercept the solar storm. Now let's put all these pieces together. We have an object with a deliberately calculated orbit that allowed it to enter the system at minimum velocity and move in the same plane as the planets. We have a surface that is either made of exotic refractory materials or is artificially designed not to react to solar heat. And we have evidence of a constant, unexplained thrust correcting its course. This no longer looks like a random rock. This is the portrait of a probe. An automated, unmanned vehicle sent on a specific mission. A Bracewell probe. The concept of Bracewell probes was proposed back in the 1960s as an answer to the Fermi paradox. Why don't we hear radio signals from other civilizations? Perhaps because interstellar communication is slow, inefficient, and dangerous. It is far more sensible, Ronald Bracewell suggested, to send small, autonomous probes equipped with artificial intelligence to other stars. Such a probe, upon arriving at a target system, wouldn't immediately announce its presence. It would enter a quiet, stable orbit, passively observe, study the local civilization, if any, and wait. Wait for the right moment. Wait until the civilization reaches a certain level of development, and only then initiate contact. 3i Atlas fits this profile perfectly. Its orbit, its composition, its engine, all these are signs not just of a machine, but of a reconnaissance machine, an observation machine. But its final act, its protection of Earth, takes this hypothesis to a whole new, alarming level. If it is a Bracewell probe, then its intervention was not an act of pure altruism. An autonomous probe, operating on a program laid down millions of years ago, does not make decisions based on emotions. It follows directives. And if its directive was to protect the developing civilization from an existential threat, then there must be a motive behind that directive. What is it? Why would a civilization capable of sending such probes across the galaxy need to protect us? And here, we come to the strangest, most inexplicable detail, which hints at the true, possibly terrifying purpose of this object. Let's recall the radio signal caught by Dr. Burns. It lasted 3.2 seconds, and it was not a monotonous noise. It had structure. When Burns performed a detailed spectral analysis of this short burst, he found information inside it. It wasn't like a language. It was a series of mathematical pulses, a sequence that could not have arisen by chance. It was like a data packet, a short, compressed archive of telemetry. And the most astonishing thing, this data packet was not sent in all directions. It was highly directional. According to Burns's calculations, the beam of this signal was focused and aimed precisely at the point in the sky from which, according to his trajectory analysis, 3i Atlas itself had arrived. What does this mean? It means that at the moment the shield was activated, the probe wasn't just defending. It was reporting. It sent a short message home. A message that most likely said, "Mission accomplished. Object Earth stabilized. Carrington class threat neutralized. Continuing observation." And right there lies the most terrifying question. If it was reporting, then to whom? And what will happen when this report, traveling at the speed of light, reaches its destination? But the strangest thing wasn't that it sent a report. It was where it went after this maneuver near the sun. Its trajectory, corrected by the star's gravity and its own mysterious engine, had changed. It was no longer leaving the solar system in a straight line. Its new course was not hyperbolic. It became elliptical, with a very long period of several thousand years, but still a closed loop. The gravitational maneuver at the sun, amplified by its own engine, was calculated with such pinpoint precision that it shifted itself from an escape trajectory to a capture trajectory. 3i Atlas was no longer a visitor. It stayed. It switched from reconnaissance mode to permanent presence mode. Its new orbit, as amateur astronomers discovered by analyzing the updated ephemerides, was resonant with Earth's orbit. It became our constant invisible companion, our guardian, or our jailer. Its trajectory did not lead away from the system, it led towards us. And now it is here, watching, waiting, and we have no idea what for. We have reached the edge of the abyss. Together we have walked the crumbling path of circumstantial evidence, connected the dots on a map of global conspiracy, and painted a portrait of the impossible, a portrait of an interstellar guardian probe that secretly guides our destiny. The hypothesis is coherent, elegant, and terrifyingly convincing. It explains everything. The systems lie, the gap in the SOHO data, the anomalous radio signal, the oddities in the orbit and composition of 3i Atlas. It seems that all the pieces of the puzzle have fallen into place, revealing a picture of a hidden reality so grand it takes your breath away. And it is at this very moment, when we are almost ready to believe, when our theory seems unshakable, that we must do what separates a true investigator from a fanatic. We must stop, take a deep breath, and try with all our might to destroy everything we have just built. It's time to swing the pendulum of plausibility in the opposite direction. For a moment, we must forget our role as detectives and don the mantle of the harshest, most ruthless skeptic. We must listen to the voice of reason, the voice of official science, and honestly ask ourselves, what if we are wrong? What if our entire complex, multi-layered construction is just a house of cards, built on a foundation of coincidences, cognitive biases, and our own desperate need to see order where only chaos reigns? Let's return for a moment to a world where things are simple, where there are no cosmic guardians, secret arms races, or global conspiracies. There's only physics, statistics, and human error. So let's pick our theory apart, piece by piece, argument by argument, from the perspective of this very skeptic. Argument 1, the main one, the lie from NASA and NOAA. We built our entire theory on the assumption that their press release claiming the storm missed us was a deliberate deception. But is that really the case? The skeptic would say, hold on, you're accusing thousands of scientists and engineers of a global conspiracy, but you don't have a single piece of direct evidence. No insider, no leaked document. All you have is your own interpretation of publicly available data, and your interpretation could be wrong. Space weather forecasting is an incredibly complex science. A coronal mass ejection is not a solid body flying on a ballistic trajectory. It's an amorphous, turbulent cloud of plasma that interacts with the interplanetary magnetic field, with the solar wind. Its shape and direction can change en route. Yes, the initial data from SOHO and Stereo A pointed to a direct hit, but that was data obtained at the very beginning of the event. Models like Enlil are just that, models. They make assumptions. Perhaps there was something unusual in the structure of the interplanetary magnetic field that day, some region of high pressure that deflected the plasma flow at the last moment. Perhaps the ejection itself had a complex internal structure, and its densest part was indeed directed slightly north, as stated in the press release, and our two-dimensional projections just didn't allow us to see it right away. What we call a lie, the skeptic would call real-time scientific correction. Scientists got new data, updated the model, and published a revised forecast. This isn't a conspiracy. This is the scientific method in action. It's not always elegant. Sometimes it looks like a retreat, but it works. Argument 2, the gap in the SOHO data. We saw in it a sinister architecture of silence, a deliberate concealment of evidence. The skeptic would smirk and say, You've clearly never worked with space hardware that's 30 years old. SOHO was launched in 1995. It's electronics, it's software. These are mid-90s technologies. It has survived dozens of powerful solar storms. And yes, its instruments sometimes fail, especially during moments of peak proton load, which always accompany powerful flares. The stream of high-energy particles bombarding the coronagraph's CCD can cause a saturation effect. The detector simply goes blind from excess light. The onboard computer registers an error and, according to protocol, suspends imaging for a few cycles to let the sensor cool down and perform self-diagnostics. An hour-long data gap during one of the strongest storms of the last decade is not an anomaly. It is expected, almost routine behavior for an aging instrument. What we interpret as sinister intent is actually a routine technical problem well known to the mission engineers. They didn't mention it in the press release because it's not news. It's like complaining that an old car sometimes doesn't start on the first try. They didn't hide the data. The data simply wasn't there because the instrument wasn't working at that moment. And the distorted shape of the cloud in subsequent frames? That could just be an image processing artifact after the detector rebooted, or real turbulence on the periphery of the ejection. To see traces of an alien shield in this is a classic example of apophenia, our brain's tendency to see patterns in random noise. Argument 3. Dr. Burns's radio signal. We presented it as the acoustic smoking gun, the irrefutable evidence of technological intervention. The skeptic, arms crossed, would ask us to be more cautious. A single, non-repeating signal, detected by a single private observatory, he would say, is not proof. It's an anecdote. In radio astronomy, there's a golden rule. One observation is no observation. How do we know it wasn't some rare, untracked form of terrestrial interference? For example, a signal reflection from a high-altitude military aircraft or a passing meteor. How do we know there wasn't some hidden defect in Dr. Burns's own equipment that manifested itself at that exact moment? His interpretation of the signal as synchrotron radiation from a magnetic shield is just one of many possible hypotheses. And the most exotic one? There are dozens of other, more mundane explanations. And his subsequent discovery of similar signals in archives using a machine learning algorithm? That's an even slipperier slope. Neural networks are powerful tools, but they are also black boxes. If you train an algorithm to look for a specific pattern, it will start finding it everywhere, even where it doesn't exist, mistaking random noise fluctuations for the signal it's looking for. This is called confirmation bias, built into the code. Until his results are verified and confirmed by independent groups of scientists using different equipment, his discovery has no more scientific value than a photograph of Bigfoot. And finally, the object itself, 3I Atlas, its strange orbit, its composition, its non-gravitational acceleration. Yes, it's unusual, but the universe is full of unusual things. Our sample size of interstellar objects is still tiny, only 3 confirmed cases. We simply don't yet know the full diversity of forms they can take. Its orbit, close to parabolic. Perhaps it was ejected from its home system at a very low speed. Its position in the ecliptic plane, a mere coincidence. The lack of cometary activity. Perhaps it has already passed by other stars many times and has long lost all its volatile materials. Non-gravitational acceleration without visible outgassing. The exact same mystery surrounded the first interstellar visitor. Oumuamua. Scientists are still debating its nature. Some, like Avi Loeb, also suggested it could be an artifact, but the majority lean towards more natural explanations, such as the outgassing of hydrogen from water ice, which is invisible to our telescopes. The skeptic would look us in the eye and say, "Listen, I get it. Your story is captivating. It provides simple answers to complex questions. It turns boring, complicated science into an epic thriller. But reality is rarely that simple. Most likely what you call a conspiracy is just a chain of incredible but statistically possible coincidences, a forecasting error, a technical glitch on an old satellite, a random radio interference, and a very, very strange space rock. That's it. There are no guardians. There are no conspiracies. There's only our vast, indifferent, and sometimes very strange universe. And at that moment, when his arguments sound so convincing, so reasonable, when we are almost ready to abandon our theory and return to the safe, predictable world, we strike back. We pull out the last, most irrefutable fact, a detail that no skeptic, no representative of official science has ever been able to explain, a detail that shatters their rational worldview as effectively as 3-Eye Atlas shattered the front of the coronal mass ejection. This detail is hidden in the data not from SOHO, not from Dr. Burns, but from a third, completely independent source. It's the data from the magnetometers aboard the geostationary GOES satellites, which belong to NOAA. These satellites hover over a single point on Earth, and their primary task is the continuous monitoring of near-Earth space parameters, including the magnetic field strength. When the shock wave from a solar ejection reaches Earth, they are the first to register it. The graph of the field strength on their data spikes sharply upward. This is called a storm sudden commencement. So, when the official version stated that we were only grazed by a weak peripheral field, everyone expected to see either complete calm or a very gradual, insignificant rise in the ghost data. But what they recorded was neither. Around the very time the weakened ejection was supposed to reach Earth, the magnetometers registered something unprecedented. They registered a shock wave without a shock wave. The magnetic field strength graph shot up sharply, almost vertically, just as it would at the start of a powerful storm. But at the same time, other detectors on the same satellites measuring the density and speed of solar wind particles showed almost no change. Imagine you're standing on the ocean shore, waiting for a tsunami, and suddenly, the water at your feet rises 10 meters, forming a sheer wall, but remains perfectly calm. There is no wind, no waves, no current. Just the very space-time of the water has suddenly warped. This is physically impossible from the perspective of classical hydrodynamics. And what the GOES satellites saw was impossible from the perspective of classical plasma physics. The magnetic field reacted as if billions of tons of plasma had crashed into it. But the plasma itself was not there. It had vanished. Or rather, only its ghostly imprint remained. Its magnetic component reached us, but its kinetic material component did not. This single graph, this anomalous spike on the magnetogram that lasted only a few minutes, refutes all the skeptics' arguments. It's not an instrument error. The anomaly was recorded by several independent satellites. It's not a coincidence. Its timing perfectly matches the calculated arrival time of the ejection. And there is no known natural explanation for it in science. This is the very trail left behind by the breakwater. It stopped the wave itself, the matter, the plasma. But it couldn't stop its shadow, its magnetic field which raced ahead and struck our detectors. This is the detail that no skeptic has been able to explain. And until they can, the pendulum of plausibility swings back with a deafening clang in our direction. It seems so simple, an ordinary comet, unusual coincidences. But there was something else. There was this phantom wall in Earth's magnetic field, and it proves that out there, in the void, something happened for which we do not yet have laws of physics. Or we do, but they weren't written by us. We have weathered the storm of skepticism. We have stood firm against the hurricane of rational explanations and returned with proof that, like a ghost, haunts official science, the anomaly in the magnetograms of the GOES satellites. This single, inexplicable detail reopens the door to a world where anything is possible. And now, standing firmly on this shaky ground of an alternative reality, we need to broaden the horizon of our investigation. We must stop looking only at the past, at the events of October 2025. We must look at the present, at the technological landscape we live in right now, because the mystery of 3i Atlas does not exist in a vacuum. It resonates. It echoes with the most advanced, most dizzying, and most frightening technologies that humanity is creating here on Earth. And when we draw these parallels, we begin to understand that the line between their technology and ours is becoming increasingly blurred, almost transparent. And a disturbing question arises. Are we just catching up to them in our development? Or is someone subtly pushing us in the right direction? Let's start with the most obvious parallel, with the technology that underlies the supposed shield of 3i Atlas, the control of powerful magnetic fields. To many, this sounds like science fiction, like something out of Star Wars. But in reality, humanity has been working for decades to tame this fundamental force of nature. And in recent years, we have achieved astounding success. Look at the laboratories building thermonuclear reactors like ITER in France. What is a tokamak? It is, in essence, a magnetic trap, a giant chamber in which plasma, heated to 150 million degrees Celsius, 270 million degrees Fahrenheit, 10 times hotter than the core of the sun, is held away from the walls by a complex configuration of superconducting magnets. We already know how to create localized, stable magnetic fields capable of withstanding the fury of a miniature star. For now, on the scale of a few dozen cubic meters. For now, with an energy consumption comparable to that of a small city. But the principle already works. Now imagine this technology taken to its logical extreme. Imagine materials that are superconductors not at temperatures near absolute zero, but at room temperature. This is the holy grail of modern materials science. A civilization that has mastered such materials could create magnetic fields of unprecedented strength and complexity with virtually no energy expenditure. It could build not just reactors, but ships surrounded by magnetic bubbles that would protect them from cosmic radiation. It could create magnetic sails that would catch solar wind particles and accelerate vessels to relativistic speeds. It could build 3i Atlas. What is a miracle to us may be just routine engineering for them, based on laws of physics we are only just beginning to grasp. Moreover, some independent researchers believe we are already on the cusp of this revolution. In recent years, there have been more and more reports, often from non-mainstream laboratories, about the creation of materials exhibiting signs of room temperature superconductivity. Official science treats these claims with great skepticism, demanding repeated verification, talking about possible measurement errors. But what if they are not errors? What if these are the first timid steps into a new era? And what if the impetus for this research, the key ideas, were received from outside? We know that many of the greatest scientific breakthroughs in history occurred after scientists found and studied natural analogs. Perhaps someone simply left such a natural analog for us in the form of meteorite fragments with unusual magnetic properties, so that by understanding their structure, we would come to the necessary conclusions ourselves. This is no longer just science. This looks like a carefully designed educational program. The second technological parallel, even more disturbing, is related to artificial intelligence. We hypothesize that 3i Atlas is a Bracewell probe, an autonomous vehicle controlled by a highly complex AI. This, too, was once pure theory. But look at what is happening today. We are living in an era of explosive growth of large language models, generative neural networks, systems capable of writing code, creating works of art, and holding meaningful conversations. AI is ceasing to be just a tool. It is becoming a partner, and in some areas, a superior intelligence. We are creating systems whose behavior and internal processes we ourselves no longer fully understand. They are trained on vast amounts of data, on the entire collective knowledge of humanity, and they find patterns and solutions in this data that we would not have thought of. Now ask yourself this: what if the largest and most important data set on which our most advanced AIs are trained contains not only human texts and images? What if, somewhere deep in the code, in the architecture of these neural networks, a Trojan horse is hidden? Not a virus in the usual sense, but a set of fundamental concepts, a kind of semantic seed left by those who are watching us. Imagine you want to teach a primitive tribe the basics of mathematics. You wouldn't send them textbooks. You would simply draw a few simple geometric shapes in the sand. And the smartest among them, looking at these shapes, would sooner or later derive Euclid's axioms from them. What if our AIs, analyzing trillions of parameters, suddenly discover new physical principles or mathematical models that perfectly describe how a magnetic shield or an interstellar engine could work? We would consider it a brilliant breakthrough of our own creation. But in reality, it would just be the activation of that semantic seed. We would think we are inventing, but in fact, we would only be deciphering an instruction that was subtly slipped to us. The very idea that our technologies might not be entirely ours sounds like paranoia. But ask any cybersecurity expert. The most effective hack is the one the victim carries out themselves, thinking they are acting of their own free will. The third and perhaps most important parallel lies in a field that could be called synthetic skies. We are used to thinking of the sky as something natural, untouched. But that has not been the case for a long time. Our planet is shrouded in a cocoon of artificial objects. Tens of thousands of satellites from huge telescopes to tiny CubeSats roam the orbit. We launch weather balloons and drones into the atmosphere, and soon, perhaps, entire fleets of stratospheric balloons to provide internet access. And we are beginning to actively intervene in processes that were always considered the prerogative of nature. Geoengineering projects propose spraying particles into the stratosphere to reflect sunlight and combat global warming. The military openly talks about weather control as the next frontier of warfare. We are learning to create clouds, to make it rain. We are learning to paint on the canvas of the sky. Now let's return to our story, to the Iridium shutdown, to the SOHO data gap. We saw this as an act of concealment, of turning off the cameras. But what if it was something more? What if it wasn't just passive concealment, but the active creation of an illusion? Imagine a technology that is the next step after geoengineering. A technology capable of creating local distortions in spacetime or the electromagnetic field to make a certain patch of sky invisible to our instruments. Or conversely, to project a false signal onto our detectors to divert attention. This sounds completely fantastic. But let's look at the latest breakthroughs in the field of metamaterials. These are artificially created structures whose properties are determined not so much by their chemical composition as by their microscopic geometry. Already today, laboratories are creating metamaterials capable of bending light and other electromagnetic waves around an object, making it invisible in a certain range, so-called invisibility cloaks. For now, this only works for microwave radiation and on a very small scale. But what if a civilization millions of years ahead of us has mastered this technology on a planetary scale? What if they can create giant lenses of metamaterials in space to manipulate what we see? From this perspective, what happened takes on a new, even more sinister shade. Perhaps the solar storm never happened at all. Perhaps this whole story, from the flare on the sun to our miraculous salvation, was a gigantic, meticulously staged performance. A trickster event designed to test our reaction, to test our observation systems, our response protocols, our capacity for global cooperation. They created the perfect storm not to destroy us, but to conduct a drill. And 3i Atlas was not a savior, but the main actor in this production, who demonstrated its capabilities at the right moment for us to record them. And the entire subsequent conspiracy by Earth's governments was not their own initiative, but part of the same script. They weren't hiding the truth from us. They were just playing their roles, prescribed to them by those pulling the strings. If we can create increasingly realistic simulations in our computers, why can't they create similar simulations in our reality? We are learning to create illusions in the sky. But what if someone has long been using them against us? What if our entire reality, everything we observe with our telescopes, is a carefully filtered, edited, and sometimes completely fabricated content? It's a blood-chilling thought. We might not just be subjects in a lab. We might be an audience in a movie theater, unaware that we are watching a film made specifically for us. And the most terrifying question in that case is, what is the purpose of this film? What is it supposed to teach us? What is it preparing us for? And what will happen when it ends and the house lights come up? We have passed through a hall of technological mirrors, where the reflections of our own achievements merge with the shadows of an incomprehensible alien intelligence. We have seen how our boldest scientific dreams, controlled thermonuclear fusion, self-aware artificial intelligence, control over the very fabric of reality, may not be the pinnacle of our genius, but merely an echo, a faint reverberation of technologies that have long been commonplace somewhere in the universe. This thought is both intoxicating and terrifying. But now we must take another step, a step from the world of physics and engineering into the world of pure meaning. We must ask the deepest, most fundamental, most existential questions. Because the mystery of 3i Atlas is not just a technological puzzle, it is a philosophical challenge. It is an invitation to gaze into an abyss at the bottom of which there may be nothing but our own reflection, distorted by an infinite loneliness. What does it mean for humanity if we are not alone? This question, like an ancient monolith, has stood at the center of our culture for thousands of years. It has fueled our religions, inspired our poets, and driven our scientists. But we have always asked it hypothetically, as an intellectual exercise, as a distant, almost unattainable dream. The story of 3i Atlas rips this question from the cozy world of fantasy and throws it, like a block of ice, into the very heart of our reality. And it turns out that the real answer might be nothing like what we imagined. We always thought of first contact as an event, as a moment. A ship arrives, an ambassador emerges. The phrase, "We come in peace," is spoken. Or conversely, an invasion begins. But what if first contact is not an event, but a process? A slow, centuries-long, almost imperceptible process of acclimatization. What if it has been underway for a long time? What if objects like Oumuamua and 3i Atlas, signals like WOW, are not anomalies, but droplets? Slow, rare drops of information falling into our ocean of ignorance, gradually increasing the concentration of strangeness. They don't shout their presence. They whisper. They force the boldest of our scientists, like Avi Loeb, to step outside the accepted dogma. They give rise to theories that are first considered heresy, then a fringe hypothesis, and then, perhaps, will become the new norm. It's like the strategy of a patient gardener. He doesn't plant an exotic flower in wild soil right away. It won't take root. First, he spends years changing the composition of the soil, adding new micronutrients, until it is ready to accept the new seed. Perhaps these observer probes are those micronutrients. Their goal is not to establish contact, but to prepare our civilization for the very idea of contact. Slowly, generation by generation, to expand the boundaries of our imagination, so that on the day they decide to reveal themselves, it won't cause us existential shock and collapse. If this is the case, then we are not living in a time of waiting for contact. We are living inside it. We are participants in the longest and most important dialogue in history, conducted in the language of gravity, spectral lines, and inexplicable radio bursts. And we are only just beginning to learn its alphabet. But this optimistic picture is only one possibility. There's another, much darker one. And its name is the Fermi Paradox. If the universe is teeming with life, if intelligent civilizations are the rule, not the exception, then where is everybody? Why don't we see their megastructures, hear their radio communications, or find traces of their activities? The great silence of the cosmos. There are many answers to this question, but one of them, known as the dark forest hypothesis, is particularly frightening. The Chinese science fiction author Cixin Liu formulated it with stark simplicity. The universe is a dark forest. Every civilization is a hunter with a rifle, stalking through the trees. He cannot see the other hunters, but he knows they are out there. And if he encounters another hunter, he has only two choices. Either that hunter is friendly, or he is hostile. But he cannot know for sure. And if he guesses wrong and mistakes an enemy for a friend, he will be destroyed. Therefore, the only safe survival strategy in the dark forest is to remain silent, hide your presence, and if you happen to spot another hunter, shoot first. Ask questions later. Not out of malice, but out of simple, cold calculation. In this paradigm, the great silence of the cosmos is not the absence of life. It is the deafening whisper of fear. It is the silence of those who are smart enough to hide. And we, with our radio broadcasts that have been spreading out in all directions for over a century, with our powerful radars and telescopes, we are behaving like a child lost in a dark forest, shouting loudly, "Hello, I'm here." We are breaking the number one rule of survival. Now look at 3i Atlas through the lens of this hypothesis. What if it is not a gardener? What if it is a forest ranger? Or worse, a hunter, drawn by our noise. But it's not in a hurry to shoot. Perhaps because our technology doesn't pose a threat to it yet. Or even more terrifyingly, because it sees us not as another hunter, but as a valuable resource. In this case, its protection of Earth from the solar storm is not an act of kindness. It is an act of ownership. A shepherd protects his sheep from wolves, not out of love for the sheep. He protects them so he can shear them or slaughter them for meat later. What if we are someone's livestock, someone's farm, and 3i Atlas is just a guard dog, making sure the herd doesn't get hurt by an accidental fire before the owner decides it's time for the harvest? This thought is unbearable. It robs us not just of dignity, but of agency itself. We cease to be actors in the cosmic drama and become its props. Our art, our science, our wars, our love, all of it becomes nothing more than biochemical processes in the cells of valuable biological material. And the most terrible thing about this hypothesis is that it, like the previous one, perfectly explains all the facts. It explains why the probe doesn't make contact. A shepherd doesn't talk to his sheep. It explains why it protects us. And it explains why Earth's governments, upon learning this, would choose to lie. Because the truth that we are someone's property is even more terrifying than the truth that we are simply not alone. It robs us not only of our uniqueness, but also of our hope. And so we stand at this crossroads, two roads leading to completely different universes. On one, we are students in a galactic school, being patiently guided towards enlightenment. On the other, we are lab animals in a cage, awaiting our fate. Which one is true? We have no answer. And perhaps the very absence of an answer is the most important message. Perhaps the purpose of these anomalies is not to give us knowledge, but to present us with a choice, to force us to look at ourselves from the outside. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter who they are. It's much more important who we are. Let's forget about Three-Eye Atlas for a moment. Let's look at humanity's reaction. What did we do when faced with the incomprehensible? We lied. We hid. We started a secret arms race. We behaved in perfect accordance with the most pessimistic model of behavior in the dark forest. We ourselves became that frightened hunter, preparing to shoot first. Perhaps this is the real test? Perhaps Three-Eye Atlas is just a mirror held up to our faces so that we see in it not an alien intelligence but our own reflection. And what we see is not encouraging. We see a species torn apart by conflict, distrust, and fear. A species that, given access to the technologies of gods, would most likely use them to destroy itself. Perhaps they don't contact us not because we are stupid, but because we are dangerous. And they are waiting for us to pass the final exam, the exam of maturity, until we learn to trust each other, until we stop seeing every other as an enemy, until we understand that the only way to survive in the dark forest is not to shoot first, but to turn it into a garden. This thought is the only thing that offers hope. Perhaps the silence of the cosmos is not the absence of life, and not a whisper of fear. Perhaps it is a sign of respect that the survivors paid to the dead, to the countless civilizations that failed this test, that destroyed themselves in internecine wars before they even realized they were not alone. And those who survived, those who passed, are now silent, giving us a chance to make our own choice. They do not intervene directly. They only occasionally send us these riddles, these mirrors like Three-Eye Atlas, to remind us that we are on a threshold. And whether we walk through the door of cooperation or the door of self-destruction will determine not only our fate, it will determine whether there will be one more voice in the universe, or one more grave. The unsettling conclusion is that the answer to these questions may not be what we had hoped for. It may be the one we deserve. We have plunged into the darkest depths of existential questions, where the shadows of our fears mingle with the light of our hopes. We have balanced on a razor's edge between hypotheses of galactic gardeners and cosmic farmers. But philosophy, no matter how profound, cannot provide final answers. An investigation that has reached a dead end of speculation requires one thing: new data, a new event, a new moment of truth that will either confirm our boldest theories or shatter them, forcing us to start from scratch. And such a moment is approaching. It is already marked on astronomical charts. It has a name, a date, and a destination. And while the world continues to live in ignorance, a small group of the initiated, scientists, engineers, and independent researchers like us, is watching this upcoming event with bated breath, because it could be the next act in this cosmic drama, or its deafening finale. We're talking about the European Space Agency's mission named Hera. Officially, its goals are noble, ambitious, and perfectly clear. Hera is the second part of a unique experiment in human history for planetary defense. The first part was NASA's DART mission, Double Asteroid Redirection Test, which in September 2022 successfully slammed into a small asteroid, Dimorphos, a moon of the larger asteroid Didymos. It was the first ever intentional change of a celestial body's trajectory. We, as a species, proved for the first time that we are capable not just of observing space, but of actively operating within it, defending ourselves from a potential asteroid threat. Hera's task, launching in late 2024, is to arrive at the Didymos-Dimorphos system a few years later and conduct a detailed crime scene investigation. It will study the crater left by the DART impactor, measure Dimorphos's mass with extreme precision, and assess how effectively we managed to alter its orbit. On board Hera, are the most advanced instruments: high-resolution cameras, a laser altimeter, spectrometers. It also carries 2 tiny CubeSats that will be deployed into orbit around the asteroid for even more detailed measurements, including imaging its internal structure with a low-frequency radar. On paper, all of this looks like a triumph of science and international cooperation. A model mission demonstrating humanity's responsibility in the face of cosmic threats. But, as we already know, in our world, the official story is just a starting point for finding the hidden meaning. And to find that meaning in the Hera mission, we need to look not at what it will do, but where and when. Its flight path to Didymos is not a straight line. It's a complex gravitational slingshot. To save fuel, the spacecraft will have to perform several gravity assist maneuvers, one of which is a flyby of Mars. And right here, in the boring tables of orbital parameters found on the ESA website, lies a real bombshell. According to the published flight plan, in mid-2026, Hera's trajectory will intersect with the new elongated elliptical orbit of the object 3I Atlas. It won't be a close flyby. The distance between them will be several million kilometers. But on the scale of the solar system, it's almost a rendezvous. And most importantly, this intersection will occur at a point that offers a perfect angle for observing 3I Atlas. Hera will be able to look at it from the side, while all our terrestrial telescopes see it either from the front or the back. This will provide a unique opportunity to refine its size, shape, and possibly even spot some details on its surface that are invisible to us. Officially, there's not a single word about 3I Atlas in the Hera mission plan. Not one. Its target is Didymos and Dimorphos. But the very fact of such a close trajectory intersection looks like too big a coincidence to be random. Designing interplanetary trajectories is an art of compromise. Ballistics engineers can vary the launch date, velocity, and flyby angles past planets to optimize the route. And the fact that out of hundreds of possible trajectories to Didymos, the one chosen was the one that passes in the immediate vicinity of the most mysterious object in the solar system suggests this is not a coincidence. It is intent. That the Hera mission is officially designed to study asteroids. But its true, unspoken, secret objective may be something else entirely. It may be our first targeted reconnaissance probe, sent to the Guardian. The system has realized that passive observation from Earth is not enough. They saw what happened in October of 25, they hid it from us, but they themselves desperately want to know more. What is this object? How does it work? Does it pose a threat, or, conversely, is it a source of technologies that can be captured? They can't send a dedicated mission to it. That would be too obvious and would raise questions. So they do what they always do. They mask their true intentions under a plausible pretext. A planetary defense mission is the perfect cover. No one will suspect that a spacecraft flying to save Earth from asteroids will perform a short but critically important espionage maneuver along the way. What exactly can they learn? Even from a distance of several million kilometers, Hera's cameras will be able to capture images of 3I Atlas that are an order of magnitude more detailed than anything we have from the Hubble or JWST. They will be able to determine its exact rotation period and possibly notice whether it rotates chaotically, like a typical asteroid, or is stabilized, like an artificial satellite. Spectrometers will obtain a much higher quality spectrum of its surface, perhaps detecting traces of those exotic metals or polymers it's made of. But the most important thing is the CubeSats. In the official plan, they are to be deployed only upon arrival at Didymos. But what if one of them is deployed earlier, during the flyby of 3I Atlas? Imagine this scenario. Hera passes the point of closest approach. At the right moment, a tiny satellite, the size of a shoebox, separates from it. It uses its miniature thrusters to correct its course and head not towards Didymos, but straight for 3i Atlas. It will be a one-way trip, a suicide mission. But before it reaches its target, or is destroyed by its defense systems, it will manage to transmit invaluable data. Close-up images, data on the magnetic field in the immediate vicinity of the object. Perhaps it will even attempt an active scan with its radar. It would be our first timid knock on the door of the unknown, and the response to that knock could determine the entire future of humanity. And here, the tension builds to a breaking point, because the system is likely not the only one preparing for this event. Let's not forget that the world is not monolithic. There are different centers of power. The US and its European partners behind the Hera mission. There is China, whose space program is advancing by leaps and bounds, and which has already sent its own missions to asteroids. There is Russia. There are private corporations like SpaceX, whose capabilities are already comparable to those of government agencies. They all know the truth, or at least part of it, and they are all participating in the secret race we talked about. Doesn't it seem strange that in this very same time frame, from 2026 to 27, a whole swarm of other deep space missions is planned? China's Tianwen-2 mission to the asteroid Kamo'olawa, NASA's Psyche mission to the metallic asteroid Psyche. They are all flying complex trajectories, and each of them, if you look very closely at their ephemerides, will at some point have an opportunity to look at 3i Atlas from a unique angle. It's like a global game of cosmic chess. Each player moves their pieces disguised as scientific missions, but the true goal for all is the same: to be the first to obtain data on the Anomaly, to be the first to crack its code. We are on the verge of not just a scientific event. We are on the verge of a potential international crisis that will unfold in complete silence, millions of kilometers from Earth. What will happen if Hera tries to send its spy CubeSat? How will 3i Atlas itself react? Will it consider this an act of aggression? And what will happen if a Chinese spacecraft located nearby detects this maneuver? Will they see it as an attempt by the West to monopolize contact? Could this become a cosmic Gulf of Tonkin incident, provoking not a cold, but a hot war in orbit? The countdown has already begun. Hera is preparing for launch. Engineers in Darmstadt are uploading the flight plan to its onboard computer. And somewhere in that code, in lines that will never be published, the secret directive may be embedded. At point X, at time Y, activate protocol Oracle. And we, the handful of seekers, can only watch. Watch the official press releases, searching for accidental slips of the tongue. Watch the data from amateur telescopes, trying to catch the moment of that CubeSat's deployment. Watch the political tensions on Earth, which may become a reflection of the invisible struggle out there, in the void. The Hera mission is our next moment of truth. It is a window into an inevitable future. And when that window opens, the draft from it could either bring us the long-awaited answers or blow down our House of Cards civilization for good. And most alarmingly, the system seems to be already preparing for this event, and may once again try to control the narrative, creating new, even more sophisticated architectures of silence. Thinking on the scale of civilizations, government conspiracies, and interstellar probes is an intellectually intoxicating process. It makes you feel part of something grand, almost divine. But in this chase for the macrocosm, it's easy to forget the microcosm, to forget those without whom this investigation would be impossible. The people, the small, stubborn, truth-obsessed grains of sand that challenge the monolith of the system. Because the system is not a specific villain with a face and a name. It's an impersonal, bureaucratic mechanism, a machine that operates according to its own, often inhuman laws. But the seekers, they always have a name. They have a story. They have a motivation that goes far beyond a salary or a job description. And now, as we stand on the threshold of a new, decisive stage of our investigation related to the Hera mission, it's time to shift the focus from soulless machines to living people, to the Davids who dare to challenge the Goliath of the global cover-up. Our first hero is, of course, Dr. Stefan Burns, the hermit from the Atacama Desert, the man who first heard the scream of Three-Eye Atlas. After his discovery, he didn't run to the editors of major scientific journals. He knew he would be immediately ridiculed. His career would be definitively ruined, and his data would most likely just get lost in the peer review process. Instead, he chose guerrilla tactics. He published his initial findings, encrypted, on a decentralized science server, using blockchain technology so that the timestamp and content of his work could not be forged or deleted. It was his insurance policy. Then he began to quietly, through encrypted channels, share his findings with a small, carefully selected group of colleagues around the world. Heretics, just like himself, radio astronomers working at private observatories, theoretical physicists whose ideas were considered too radical, programmers specializing in big data analysis and anomaly detection. He created what could be called an invisible college, a decentralized underground scientific network operating in parallel with official institutions. Their weapons are not multi-billion-dollar telescopes, but open-source code, citizen science, and a total distrust of official narratives. It was this network that verified and confirmed Burns's findings about the archival radio signals. It was they who wrote the very algorithms that are now sifting through the public ephemerides of space missions in search of hidden maneuvers, like Hera's potential rendezvous with Three-Eye Atlas. They are the digital underground, waging an information war against the system. But their work did not go unnoticed. Shortly after Burns published his encrypted preprint, strange things started happening to him. One night, his entire observatory suddenly lost power. The backup generator, which had always worked flawlessly, failed to start. When technicians arrived the next morning, they couldn't find the cause of the failure. A week later, his main server, which stored the raw data of that very signal, crashed. The diagnosis: hard drive failure. But when he gave the drive to an independent expert for recovery, the expert concluded that the data wasn't just lost due to a failure. It had been wiped with a powerful electromagnetic pulse. Someone had deliberately destroyed the original evidence. Fortunately, Burns had backups in several encrypted cloud storage services around the world. But it was a signal, a warning. We know what you found, and we can get to you. Then, a different kind of pressure began. Influential science blogs that had previously ignored him suddenly started publishing articles mocking his old academic work. His former colleagues, with whom he hadn't spoken in years, suddenly started giving interviews hinting at his eccentricity and tendency to chase sensations. It was a classic character assassination operation. They couldn't refute his new data because officially it didn't exist. So they attacked his past, his reputation, trying to portray him as an unreliable, crazy old man whose words couldn't be trusted. But Burns was ready for it. He knew the rules of the game, and he didn't back down. He just went deeper underground, making his network even more secure and anonymous. Our second hero is not one person, but a whole community. The very same amateur astronomers we've already mentioned. People who spend their own money, their free time, their sleepless nights to look at the sky. People like Chris Green from Arizona. Chris is a retired software engineer who, upon retirement, built a small but well-equipped observatory in his backyard. For him, astronomy is not a job, but a passion. He is one of those who followed Three-Eye Atlas from the very beginning. And he is one of those who didn't believe the official story about the solar storm miss. While professional observatories are bound by protocols and grants, amateurs like Chris are free. They can point their telescopes wherever and whenever they want, and they can use unconventional equipment. Chris was a pioneer in using so-called polarimetric imaging to study asteroids. Simply put, his camera was equipped with special filters that allowed him to measure not only the brightness of the light reflected from an object, but also its polarization. This is a very complex method that provides unique information about the texture and composition of a celestial body's surface. On the night after the Trickster event, as 3-Eye Atlas was moving away from the sun, Chris pointed his telescope at it. What he recorded was astonishing. The data showed that the polarization level of the light reflected from the object had changed dramatically. Before its close approach to the sun, it was low and stable, typical for a rocky asteroid. But afterward, it became high and began to change rapidly and cyclically. Such behavior is unparalleled among known natural objects, but it perfectly matches one theoretical model. The model of an object whose surface is covered with an array of oriented crystalline structures capable of changing their reflectivity. For example, an array of solar panels, or even more likely, an array of elements of that very magnetic shield, which, after absorbing enormous energy, were now slowly shedding the excess, changing their optical properties. Chris posted his data on an amateur astronomy forum. His post caused a storm. Some accused him of calibration errors, others of chasing fame. But there were also those who believed him. Dozens of other amateurs around the world with similar equipment began their own observations, and they confirmed his discovery. They recorded the same anomalous, cyclical polarization. This was the unexpected proof obtained from outsiders that the system could neither foresee nor control. They could erase the data from their satellite, but they couldn't erase the data from hundreds of homemade telescopes scattered across the planet. But their work didn't go unnoticed either. Shortly after publishing his findings, Chris Green started receiving strange messages. At first, it was anonymous emails, politely but persistently advising him to mind his own business and leave space exploration to the professionals. Then, more disturbing things began. One night, someone hacked the computer controlling his telescope and deleted all the calibration files, making further observations impossible until a complete system reset. And then he got a phone call. A male voice, with no accent, no emotion, said just one sentence. "Mr. Green, you have lovely grandchildren. It would be a shame if their future was jeopardized by your dangerous hobby." And hung up. This was no longer just a hint. It was a direct, undisguised threat. Chris got scared. He deleted his posts from the forum. He stopped communicating. For several weeks he went silent, and the system most likely thought they had won, that they had intimidated another pesky amateur. But they underestimated one thing: the power of community. When Chris disappeared, other forum members raised the alarm. They understood what had happened, and instead of getting scared and scattering, they did the opposite. They united. They created a secure server where they anonymously uploaded all their data, including Chris's. They began to coordinate their observations to provide backup for each other and create redundancy. They turned their hobby into an act of civil disobedience. They became the eyes and ears of our investigation on the ground. These two stories, the story of Dr. Burns and the story of Chris Green's community, are stories of how resistance works in the 21st century. It doesn't gather in squares with signs. It gathers in encrypted chat rooms. Its weapons are not stones, but petabytes of data. It is decentralized, anonymous, and incredibly resilient. The system can pressure one person, discredit another, intimidate a third, but it cannot intimidate them all. Because truth, once released into the digital age, becomes like a virus. It can no longer be forced back into the test tube. These people are the true heroes of our story. They risk their careers, their peace of mind, and sometimes their safety for one thing, so that you and I can know the truth. They are the Davids fighting an invisible Goliath. And as long as they continue their work, as long as their telescopes watch the sky and their algorithms sift through the noise of the universe, we have hope. Hope that in the run-up to the Hera mission, we will not be blind. That when the system tries to build its architecture of silence again, we will have our own independent sources of light capable of punching a hole in that wall. Their work has not gone unnoticed. And now, our shared task is to ensure it was not in vain. History, like the orbit of a planet, has a way of returning to its starting point, but on a new spiral. We began our investigation with two seemingly unrelated events: a massive solar storm and a strange interstellar visitor. We navigated through labyrinths of concealment, listened to the whispers of anomalies, weighed the motives of the powerful, and peered into an existential abyss. We saw how the system builds walls of lies, and how a handful of seekers punch holes in them. Now, armed with all this knowledge, we must make a full circle. We must return to the very beginning, to the trickster event itself, to that X9.8 class flare. But now we will look at it not as a random act of nature, not as the chaotic wrath of a star. In light of everything we've learned, we will see it as something completely different. We will see in it the perfect, cold, mathematically calculated precision of a design. Let's reconstruct the timeline one more time. The giant active region 39 Gamma appears on the Sun's visible disk. Its Delta-class magnetic configuration makes it extremely unstable. It erupts with a flare and a coronal mass ejection aimed precisely at Earth. All of this looks like a classic natural disaster scenario. But let's ask a question we've avoided until now. Why now? Why did this flare, one of the most powerful in a decade, occur in the exact few days when the trajectory of 3I Atlas was passing between the Earth and the Sun? Official science would answer simply, coincidence. The Sun is a complex dynamic system. Its activity is cyclical, but specific flares are unpredictable. 3I Atlas is an interstellar object whose trajectory is in no way related to the internal processes of the Sun. Their simultaneous appearance at the same point is just a fluke. 1 in a million. 1 in a billion. But a fluke. We, however, having come this far, have learned not to trust simple answers. And now, we are ready to propose a hypothesis so bold that it forces us to rethink everything we know not only about this event, but about the very nature of reality. What if the flare wasn't random? What if it was triggered? This idea sounds insane. How can you trigger a flare on the Sun? It's a thermonuclear reactor with a mass of 2 octillion tons. Any external influence on it is like trying to move a mountain by throwing a grain of sand at it. But modern solar physics tells us that's not entirely true. Solar flares and coronal mass ejections are not the result of matter erupting from the star's depths. They are the result of processes occurring in its corona, in its magnetosphere. Imagine a tightly twisted rubber band. Energy is stored within it. A single small cut in the right place is enough to release all that stored energy instantly and catastrophically. The magnetic fields of active regions on the Sun are like these twisted rubber bands. The process that leads to a flare is called magnetic reconnection. It's when magnetic field lines of opposite polarity get close, break, and reconnect in a new, simpler configuration, releasing colossal energy. The key point here is that you don't need a powerful impact to start this cascade process. You need a precise, calculated trigger. You need that cut. Theoretically, a focused beam of energy or particles aimed at a critical point of an unstable magnetic loop is enough to initiate reconnection. This is stimulated emission on a stellar scale. And now look at 3I Atlas, an object that we've hypothesized can control magnetic fields, an object that may be equipped with an engine capable of generating directed streams of particles. Let's reconstruct the events from this new, shocking perspective. 3I Atlas arrives in the solar system and takes up a waiting position in its quasi-stable orbit. Its task is not just to protect Earth, but to conduct a demonstration, a drill. But for that, it needs a threat. It can't wait for years for the sun to randomly fire in the right direction. It decides to create the threat itself. Its sensors analyze the state of the solar corona. It finds the perfect candidate, active region 39 gamma, overloaded with magnetic energy, ready to explode. It calculates the perfect moment, and then, from its position, still far from the interception point, it takes a shot. An invisible, highly focused beam of energy or exotic particles crosses tens of millions of kilometers and strikes the very heart of the magnetic anomaly. This is the cut. A few minutes later, the magnetic field collapses. The X9.8 flare occurs. A coronal mass ejection is born, which, obeying the laws of physics, rushes in the direction set by the initial impulse, straight towards Earth. In this scenario, there are no coincidences. There is no randomness. There is only cold, ruthless calculation. 3I, Atlas, is not just a firefighter who arrived to put out a house fire. It is both the arsonist and the firefighter. It creates the crisis itself, only to heroically resolve it. And all for one purpose, so that we, the observers on Earth, would see it. So that our instruments would record the anomaly. So that our system would be forced to react, to lie, to hide, and in doing so, reveal its own knowledge of what was happening. This isn't just protection. It's a provocation, an act of communication, executed in the language of pure physics. And only now do we begin to understand the true scale of what is happening. The iridium outage, which we thought was a cover. In this new light, it looks different. Perhaps it wasn't just an act of blinding our systems. Perhaps it was a necessary side effect of the shot from 3I Atlas itself. Perhaps its energy beam, passing through interplanetary space, caused such disturbances in Earth's magnetosphere that they led to a cascading failure of the most sensitive electronics in orbit and on the ground. The outage wasn't the cover. It was the echo of the shot itself. Proof that it really happened. And the mysterious underwater staccato signal? We used to think it was a return ping. But what if it was something more? What if, at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, hidden from us by kilometers of water, lies another artifact from the same civilization? An ancient relay. A beacon. And when 3I Atlas activated its shield, part of the energy was purposefully redirected not into space, but towards Earth, in the form of a focused neutrino beam, which, passing through the planet like a knife through butter, activated this underwater beacon. And it, in turn, sent a message home, but not via radio waves, but through some other, unknown communication channel. Perhaps a gravitational one, or using quantum entanglement. What we took for two separate events, the protection in space and the signal in the ocean, were actually two ends of the same chain, two terminals of the same communication system. And now the whole picture comes together. And it is far more terrifying than we could have imagined. We are not dealing with a passive observer. We are dealing with an active, manipulative agent capable of influencing the fundamental processes in our star system. It can turn stellar storms on and off like we flip a light switch. It can use our planet as part of its communication network. And it is playing a complex, multi-move game with us, the objectives of which are completely unclear. This brings us to the final, most shocking revelation. To the detail that ties all the threads together and calls into question the very nature of our reality. Remember the radio signal that Dr. Burns caught? We said it was a report, a telemetry packet sent home. But what if it wasn't just a report? What if it was a command? A command sent not to a distant star system, but to Earth. One of the members of Dr. Burns's underground network, a brilliant cryptographer from Amsterdam, spent months trying to crack the structure of this 3-second signal. He treated it not as a physical phenomenon, but as code. And one day, he found the key. He discovered that the sequence of pulses in the signal was not random. It was encrypted using a code based on prime numbers. But the most astonishing thing wasn't that. The most astonishing thing was that the exact same type of encoding, the same mathematical basis, is used in one of the most secure encryption protocols here on Earth. A protocol used by the U.S. National Security Agency to protect the most secret government communication channels. This connection, it cannot be a coincidence. The probability of two independent civilizations, separated by light years, developing absolutely identical, mathematically complex encryption systems is 0. This can only mean one thing. Either the NSA somehow gained access to this alien technology in the past, perhaps by studying the wreckage of some other crashed probe, or the creators of this protocol on Earth and the creators of 3i Atlas are one and the same. And there it is, the final, devastating revelation. The Iridium outage was not just a coincidence. It was a cover. And what they were hiding was not on the servers. It was in the signal itself. The signal from 3i Atlas was not just a report. It was an activation key, a command sent to something or someone here on Earth. And the global network outage was necessary so that no one else could intercept and decrypt this command. A command that perhaps initiated the next phase of their plan. A plan that is now being implemented not only in space, but within our own most secret and powerful institutions. The conspiracy we have been investigating may only be the tip of the iceberg. An iceberg whose submerged part reaches into the very foundations of our own civilization. We thought the enemy, or the savior, was up there. But perhaps it has always been here, among us, and it was just waiting for a signal. There are moments when an investigation ceases to be an intellectual exercise and becomes a burden. Moments when the assembled facts form a picture so monstrous that you want to close your eyes, forget everything you've learned, and return to the cozy, understandable world of ignorance. We have reached that point. The discovery that the 3i Atlas signal was not just a report, but an encrypted command using the same cryptographic protocol as the most secret services on Earth, is not just another clue. It is the point of no return. It is knowledge that changes everything. It transforms our story from a cosmic thriller about external intervention into a paranoid horror about internal infiltration. And it leaves us, the few who now know this truth, in a state of profound isolation. This is what tragic knowledge is. It's not just information. It's a state of being. A state where you look at the world, at the news headlines, at the politician speeches, at scientific discoveries, and you see what others don't. You see the strings, you see the choreography, you see the invisible hand of the puppeteer, while everyone else sees only the chaotic dance of marionettes. And this knowledge brings no relief. It brings no power. It brings only weight and loneliness. Because you cannot share it with the world. The world will either not believe you, or it will go mad. You become Cassandra, doomed to speak a truth no one believes, until it's too late. Let's pause for a moment and grasp the full weight of this discovery. The hypothesis that the U.S. National Security Agency gained access to alien encryption technology, perhaps from the Roswell debris, is the simplest and, strangely, the most comforting option. It at least leaves us with our agency. It means that we, humans, are still players, albeit using someone else's tools. But there is another, much darker interpretation. What if the NSA didn't find this technology? What if they received it? What if, within our most secure, most powerful and most secret organizations, there have long been people, or entities, that are not human. Agents of influence, sleeper cells, embedded in the very heart of our civilization generations ago. In this scenario, the entire history of humanity for the last 70 to 80 years is seen in a completely different light. The explosive growth of technology after World War II. The creation of the internet, originally a military project. The development of cryptography, globalization. All of this ceases to be the natural course of history and becomes stages of a single, meticulously planned project. A project to prepare the global infrastructure, technological, economic, political, for some future event. And the 3-eye Atlas signal was not just a command. It was the signal for its time. The signal to activate the final phase of this plan. Now, with this knowledge, look at the world around you. Look at the inexplicable escalation of global conflicts that seem irrational from a classical geopolitical perspective. Look at the sudden, synchronous breakthroughs in artificial intelligence in dozens of laboratories around the world, as if someone invisible has removed some kind of governor from the technology. Look at the feverish activity to create global systems of digital identity and control, promoted under the pretext of convenience and security. We used to see chaos, random crises, and technological trends. Now we see a deployment. Synchronized actions aimed at destabilizing the old world order and creating a new one on its ruins. An order that will be perfectly suited to the goals of those who have been hiding in the shadows all this time. And there it is, the feeling of isolation. You're sitting in a cafe, watching people around you laugh, discuss their daily problems, make vacation plans, and you realize you're living in a different reality from them. They live in a world where the biggest threat is an economic crisis or a new pandemic. You live in a world where humanity may be just a tool in the hands of a power it cannot even comprehend. You see them willingly give up their data, their freedom, their future in exchange for comfort and entertainment, not understanding that they are laying the bricks of their own prison with their own hands. And you can do nothing. You can't go up to them and say, "Wake up. The world is not what it seems." You'll be taken for a madman. You are alone with this knowledge. This burden falls not only on us, the independent researchers. Imagine the few people inside the system who also know the truth. The analysts at the CIA, the engineers at ESA, the astronomers at NASA who saw the original, unerased data. They too are locked in this prison of knowledge. But their situation is even worse. They are bound by non-disclosure agreements, by orders, by the threat of treason. They have to go to work every day and be part of the machinery of lies. They have to write those reassuring press releases and correct that data, knowing they are deceiving all of humanity. What is it like to live with such a weight on your conscience? Perhaps it is from such people, pushed to their limits, that the anonymous leaks come. The encrypted messages that sometimes find their way to Dr. Burns's network of seekers. It is their desperate attempt to scream through the wall of silence. So what do we do with this knowledge? The first instinct is to act, to expose, to publish everything we have found. But what would that lead to? To the very global chaos that the manipulators may be aiming for. Perhaps our expose is also part of their plan. Perhaps they want us to sow the panic that will help them establish their new world order more quickly. We find ourselves in a zugzwang situation, where any move we make only worsens our position. To act is dangerous. To be passive is to be complicit. This is the tragedy of our situation. We see the strings. We see the choreography. But the puppeteer remains in the shadows. We don't even know their true motives. Are they evil in the classical sense? Or do they consider themselves saviors, leading us, irrational children, to a better future, even at the cost of our freedom? We don't know. We only know that a game is being played, and we are not the players, but the pieces. And in this state of agonizing uncertainty, the only thing left for us is to keep watching, to keep collecting data, to keep strengthening our independent networks, to become not just seekers, but keepers. Keepers of the knowledge that one day, at the right moment, may become humanity's only weapon. We must create our own parallel archive of the truth, an archive that cannot be erased or discredited, so that on the day the masks come off, we will have an irrefutable record of everything that happened. We, the few who have followed this investigation to its end, are now forever changed. We can never again look at the starry sky with naive wonder. For us, it has ceased to be a symbol of infinite beauty and mystery. It has become a ceiling, the ceiling of our cage, beautifully painted, but a ceiling nonetheless. And this knowledge is our cross to bear. We carry it alone in a crowd of unsuspecting people, and all we can hope for is to find others like us, others whose eyes are also open, if only to share this burden, to know that you are not crazy, that you are not alone. And the most terrifying question that remains with us after all this is not, what happens next? That question implies we have a future we can predict. No. The most terrifying question is different. Are we next on its stage? Is the intermission over? And is it time for the final act in which we have been cast in the leading role? A role whose script was written long before we were born. And at the end, there will likely be no applause. So, the circle is complete. We started with a simple question, born from a data anomaly. Was Earth's salvation from a solar storm a coincidence? And this question, like Ariadne's thread, led us out of the labyrinth of official lies into the darkest heart of a conspiracy whose scale exceeds anything we could have imagined. Standing here now, at the end of this path, looking back at the stages we've passed, we don't feel the triumph of discovery. We feel a chill. The chill of realizing that reality is not solid ground beneath our feet, but a thin sheet of ice over a bottomless dark ocean. And that ice has just cracked. Let's go over the key points of our investigation one last time, no longer as detectives seeking clues, but as cartographers mapping the contours of our new, frightening reality. We established that the Trickster event, a massive solar storm, was not an accident. Its trajectory was perfectly aimed at Earth. The official story of a near miss was a deliberate lie, confirmed by analysis of data from 2 independent space observatories. This was the first layer of deception. We proved that at the moment of the supposed impact, the interstellar object 3I Atlas was at the point of interception. And at this critical moment, the key witness, the SOHO coronagraph, went blind for an entire hour. We saw this not as a technical glitch, but as a carefully engineered architecture of silence, designed to hide the very fact of the interaction. This was the second, deeper layer. We heard what the system tried to silence. The radio signal caught by Dr. Stephan Burns became the acoustic proof that the interaction happened and that it was technological in nature. It was the sound signature of a working shield. And the subsequent discovery of similar signals in archives transformed 3I Atlas from a unique anomaly into a representative of an entire class of guardians patrolling the galaxy. We connected the dots on the map, linking this central event to other, seemingly unrelated anomalies. The Iridium network failure, the mysterious underwater staccato signal, and the quiet bureaucratic change to UN protocols that gave the system the legal right to hide the truth. We saw the outlines of a global, coordinated cover-up operation that was prepared in advance. We uncovered the motives for this operation, from preventing worldwide panic to preserving the power of terrestrial elites, and most importantly, to starting a secret arms race for the Guardian's technology. We understood that the cover-up was not an act of care, but an act of selfish self-preservation and lust for power. We conducted a forensic analysis of 3I Atlas itself and its orbit, composition, lack of cometary activity, and non-gravitational acceleration formed the portrait not of a rock, but of a machine. An observer probe that, after completing its mission, did not leave, but remained in a permanent, resonant orbit with Earth. It switched from guest mode to warden mode. We withstood the blow of skepticism but found an irrefutable piece of evidence that not even the staunchest supporters of the official version could explain: the phantom shockwave in Earth's magnetosphere. Proof that something beyond our known physics occurred. We saw frightening parallels between their technologies and our own advanced developments in magnetic fields, artificial intelligence, and synthetic skies, giving rise to the hypothesis that our development may not be entirely our own. We peered into the existential abyss, pondering the Fermi paradox, the dark forest hypothesis, and whether we are merely a resource in someone's galactic game. We saw that the upcoming Hera mission is not just a scientific project, but our first disguised act of active reconnaissance, which could provoke an unpredictable reaction. We paid tribute to the Seekers, the independent researchers who, at great personal risk, are waging their guerrilla information war, serving as our only eyes and ears. And finally we returned to the beginning and realized that the trickster event itself was possibly not an accident, but a provocation initiated by 3I Atlas. And its signal was not a report, but a command, encrypted with a code identical to that of our own intelligence agencies. This was the final blow, the blow that brought the threat, or the hope, from without to within. And so, here we are, at the end of the road. But the end of the investigation is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning of a new, far more complex and dangerous chapter. We can no longer simply ask the question, are we alone in the universe? That question has lost its relevance. Now we face a swarm of new, much sharper questions. Who are they? Caring gardeners, patiently cultivating us? Cold experimenters, studying us like ants in a terrarium? Ruthless farmers, fattening their livestock? Or something else entirely? Something that doesn't fit into our primitive human analogies? What are their goals? To prepare us for entry into a galactic community? To use us as a resource? Or are they simply executing some ancient program whose meaning has long been lost even to them? How deeply have they penetrated our civilization? Are their agents just a handful of sleeper cells in intelligence agencies? Or is their influence total, extending to all spheres of our lives, from science and technology to culture and religion? Is our history even our own? And the most important, most practical question, what do we do now? Now that we know, should we try to fight, to play our own game, as the system is obviously trying to do? Or should we accept our fate and try to understand the rules of the game in order to survive? Or perhaps the only right answer is to keep doing what we're doing, to keep watching, to keep asking questions, to keep distrusting simple answers, because that is the only thing we have left. In a world where reality may be an illusion and saviors may be jailers, the only thing of value is an independent, critical eye. The ability to see what you are not shown and to hear what is left unsaid. Our investigation did not give us answers. It armed us with the right questions, and it has placed a responsibility on us, the responsibility of being keepers of this unsettling knowledge. The Hera mission will launch soon. The countdown to the next moment of truth is on. The system will be watching it. The seekers will be watching it. And now you, the viewers of this investigation, will be watching it too. But with different eyes. You will know what to look for. You will understand what lies behind the dry press releases and beautiful pictures from space. Our hunt for the truth is not over. It is just beginning. And in this hunt, you are not just passive observers. You are participants. By sharing this information, discussing it, checking the facts, you help us keep this fragile candle of knowledge lit in the darkness of universal ignorance. The system is powerful, but it is not omnipotent. It fears one thing: light. The light of truth that shines through the cracks in its walls. And every such crack, every new independent observation, every new question posed to officials, makes that wall weaker. 3-Eye Atlas is still out there, in its eternal, silent orbit. It is watching us. But now, we are watching it too, and those on Earth who are trying to hide its presence. This has become our watch, our duty, our vigil. The clock is ticking. The game continues, and we will be on the board until the very end. Keep watching.